Hello, welcome to Money Lap Live. I'm Parker Kligerman and joined as always by Landon Cassill. This is our podcast about all motorsports, but now live on YouTube till December 13th. Our attempt at a real U.S. motorsports show, even though we have no idea what we are doing. On today's show, you can expect topics ranging from Formula One to late models, Macau GP, World Rally, MotoGP, sports cars, and a few new segments later in the show. We also have guests, Joe Pompliano, James Hinchcliffe, and up-and-comer Kade Brown. This is Money Lap Live. Let's go! Landon, we're live. We're here.
Let's go. I love that. You got me hyped. I'm ready to just absolutely run through a manhole cover.
Wow, that's
timely.
Show. Considering that's something that somebody attempted to do this past weekend. You know, there was a race in Vegas this weekend. Did you hear about it?
Yes. There was based on some social media reports, there were several races to be scheduled, but the first one got canceled.
Was that the World Grand Prix Championships of motor car racing, car motorsports on Friday or Thursday morning, 1 a.m. that got canceled? Not to be confused with the World. Yeah.
The F1 tourists were out in Las Vegas. It was the scheduled event.
There was the SuperBowl of motorsports tourism here in Las Vegas.
My gosh. What a beautiful choice of words, Parker. The Super Bowl of motorsports.
Before we have a insanely packed show, as I just alluded to there in our intro, I have to say for all our podcast listeners, although this is very visual, as we're trying to do this on YouTube, obviously with visuals, we'll do our best to describe those visuals as we go through the show. There will be a lot of videos. You'll hear them, maybe some photos. We'll do our best, but of course, go check it out on YouTube after this if you want to see some of those things. You know that we've done this before, by the way. We have some footage that surfaced from 2016. And this is amazing because this was my first attempt at doing something live. This was on NBC's Facebook. I can't believe they let me put this on anything involving their name. It was the lowest budget show in NBC history called the Motorsports Lunch Break. You were one of my first guests. I think you were my first guest.
Let's see it.
Yeah. Oh no, we broke it. It's so bad, such bad. Oh, here it is. I'm Parker Kligerman. We do have a special guest today. We'll get into that in a little bit. And we're really excited about this special guest because he's kind of hilarious. Awesome. That's cool. Basketball, right? Am I right on that one?
Do you live under a rock?
Basically, yes. A motorsports rock. This is the motorsports show. We don't do other sports.
When I was in middle school, I'm not going to lie, I wanted those frosted tips.
You wanted frosted tips.
Yeah.
I hear it.
I'm going to be straight with it.
That's fun. Frosted Tips, Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s from the early 2000s.
Who knew that the Money Lap Live was born that day?
It's honestly, I don't know if it's something we want to say that we had any part or anything to do with. But I guess the genesis of it all was that day, which is nice. We did look a lot younger, but I'm not sure any better looking. I think right now, far better looking this day and age. So there is some other racing news out there. There's another racing series in America aside from the World Championship Grand Prix F1 World Motor Racing Championship. It's called NASCAR. Big deal happening right now. There's been a lot of discussion throughout this year about the TV package that ends in 2024 and the renegotiations that are happening and sort of what's going to happen next. It is probably the largest form of income for a motor racing series like NASCAR. Some news came out, or at least a report from Adam Stern, that this middle package, so basically the way it worked in the last package for 10 years was it was Fox in the first half of the season, NBC took over the second half, right? Before this, the prior package from 2007 to 2014 was ESPN or Fox. Then you had Turner, which was TNT for about 6 races in the summer. And then you had, ESPN that took over for the rest. ESPN also did the entirety of the Xfinity series at that time. Well, it sounds like in this new contract, they're trying to do something similar except it's been this summer package was hopefully going to be a streaming partner. Whether, one of the reports for a while now has been Amazon. Amazon has been the leading one there. And now it's surfaced that Turner is interested in some capacity of being a part of that. And they've expanded it to make it more enticing to possibly 10 races on streaming, which is the report. So this could be, I think there's a little bit of misconceptions here, right? Because I think some people are like, oh no, it'll be behind a paywall and that sort of thing. I believe that is a possibility. But part of the idea of this is to take a 38-week season, put it on a couple different platforms that have different audiences and different opportunities, and also leveraging the willingness of these streaming companies to spend an exorbitant amount for content. And therefore, could that potentially then go towards the teams and make up for the lost possibility of having a lot of people watching?
Now, in terms of paywall, are we saying that we're still talking about Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So are we talking about Amazon Prime is the paywall, or is there a different, more specific paywall to this content?
I don't think there's not a lot of information. It's a lot of speculation. We're not in those rooms. Can't say I'm sitting in the boardroom right now negotiating this multi-billion-dollar deal. There's people in well-fitting suits that are far smarter than me. But I think I believe it would be most likely if it's Amazon Prime, some of their MFL Thursday Night Football deal.
I'm not entirely afraid of Amazon Prime, just in terms of potential viewership. I feel like, I think it's still, Amazon Prime isn't where I think to go to watch live sports yet, but I mean, a lot of people use Amazon Prime and have access to that platform to begin with. So it kind of excites me. I think the other thing to talk about too is just the idea of having this sort of summer series or breaking up the season in terms of broadcast partner and having more opportunities for a different type of creative look to the sport midway through the season. Basketball is doing that right now with their in-game or in-season tournament, I think they're calling it. We've done it in the past with the summer schedule with I think was it TNT that did that back in the day.
TNT. Well, that's what I just explained to you. Obviously, we're not listening.
And also just that changing of the energy, just an energy shift, I think, in the middle of the season is good for excitement and viewership. Denny Hamlin was talking about somehow having this, in-season tournament, and on Dirty Mo, they were keeping up with it and throwing around this idea of having this unique tournament structure or something like that with a big prize. And also we saw a pretty good bump in our TV ratings when NBC took over this summer. And to me, it was like a energy shift, right? And it was a new set of faces and new creative to look at that got people excited about the season. So I know I'm kind of like departing from the core topic of talking about TV deals, but there's just not much for us to know. It's all speculation, right? It's not much for us to know or talk about in terms of the details of that TV deal and the numbers and how it affects the teams and things like that. But these ideas that you're talking about of kicking around a 10-race schedule or something in the midsummer, I think it really opens the door for some unique content.
I think it does. And we'll see. I think the reason I wouldn't be afraid of a streaming partner is the possibility of them investing massively in promotion, right? The NFL being on Thursday Night Football, it has, I don't think, affected NFL in a major way, but it's been the promotion of Amazon saying like, hey, everything you watch in Amazon Prime, reminder, NFL football this Thursday, like the teams that are playing on every show you watch on Amazon Prime. If NASCAR is there, you're hitting a huge, I think Amazon Prime, the last number I saw was like 80 million people in the US, or over 80 million, maybe approaching 100 million people have Amazon Prime now. So you're approaching cable numbers. You're approaching Netflix numbers. I think Netflix is 110 million or something, maybe 150 million probably at this point. But the point being, you're getting those numbers. So if they promote it, there is a possibility of having a similar size audience, which would then be a massive win. Because if you can get a similar size audience plus the pay that a streaming company is willing to levy out there, which is going to go, to the teams through their agreements with NASCAR,
Right.
that is going to be a double win, right? But I mean, that's where I think it could be big. If you get the right partner. I don't, I would love an Apple TV, an Amazon, Netflix, like those, these major tech companies that are willing to put huge amounts of dollars behind promotion is who you want. The smaller ones, I think that's where I'd be weary, right? That's where you're taking a bet, kind of like when you go cable versus network back in the last TV deal, right?
You bring up a really good point that is often talked about, or most recently talked about, when it comes to team sponsors, right? And that was the topic. I think we talked about it. I think Denny's talked about it. That back in the day, the team sponsors not only, committed to their partnership with their race teams, but they invested in activating those deals, right? So there was national ad campaigns and TV commercials, and the drivers were, really part of the brand message, just not just, having them on the car. And that's something that the sport has kind of lacked in this generation of sponsors, is maybe that activation. Not to insult any sponsors that are heavily investing in activation right now, but it's just doesn't seem to be the same as it was back in the 90s or 2000s. And that same mindset, I think, extends to the network partner, and that's where you could have this opportunity to make up for eyeballs and overall viewership, even if our broadcast partner is a smaller platform, quote unquote, right, than a cable network. If it's a streaming network that's heavily investing in activation and promotion of the product, you might do better, do more good for the sport.
Hey, one thing we should talk about is on this episode and going forward, you may hear some other voices chime in occasionally here on the Money Lap Live. We have of course you have our guest that will be coming here, but we also have producer Josh out there and some of our team, Zach, who's one of our director, who might chime in occasionally. And I believe producer Josh has a point he wants to add here on this discussion. Landon, should we allow him? There he is.
Everybody. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about with the Prime option is not just behind Amazon Prime and Prime Video, but you also have the backing of one of the platforms that we're very familiar with on Twitch and live chat and all that. Twitch is a simulcast of Thursday Night Football with Amazon Prime. As well, on Turner, you have Max and HBO Max, which is part of that bigger organization. And they already do live sports streaming. So it could be something where maybe it's a simulcast, not just on a cable network, but also onto a streaming service or a free to access service like Twitch, with like an Amazon option. Just an idea.
Got it. All right. Well, that's a good point. You have the interaction and the live chat. We've got that going right now on our YouTube for Money Lap Live, a live chat out there. Viewers are coming in. They're trickling in as we get the word out there right now. We're a bit behind last week, but hopefully our friends out there can help us promote to get more of our viewers back from last week. Or they just didn't return, Landon, because they didn't like our show. I don't know.
Well, we need to get moving. We're moving kind of slow this morning.
We are moving slow. Let's get going. So next up, we alluded to it, F1 Vegas. It was the biggest thing in the motorsports world this past week and into the weekend. What a massive event that started with some of the off-track stuff we talked about last week in terms of the shows the teams are putting on, the livery launches, all those amazing things they did, them and basically being so involved in American culture so early on throughout that week, on the drivers being on late night shows and that sort of thing. Some of them avoided Money Lap Live. We get that. That's understandable. But it led to the first practice, 1 a.m. Friday morning or Thursday night, whatever way you wanted to look at it. And there was an issue right off the bat. And they had pretty cold temperatures. And then Carlos Sainz, 8 minutes into the first practice, hits a pothole or hits a drain hole cover and destroys his car. This cancels practice. It goes on this delay. They end up having to kick fans out. And then the fans were very upset about this because they didn't get to see the practice. Some people came there who could only afford those Thursday/Friday tickets that were the cheapest tickets, are now not able to see any cars. This left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It started the weekend off with a lot of discussion and detractors out there. I may have had a fun tweet or two, whatever. That led to the announcement that the group of the fans were coming together to actually, in a class action lawsuit, sue Formula One in Las Vegas to get their money back after F1 offered a long 600-word explanation without ever saying sorry or apologizing, which the rumor was because that admits fault in the United States, and then eventually offered them a $200 voucher for merchandise at the Vegas Grand Prix. So you had Max Verstappen, who said he would, if he was them, he would tear the place down. He had a lot of fun quotes. And so this sort of kicked off the weekend wrong. We get through qualifying, which was an interesting show, and then into the race, which turned out to save the whole thing. A great race can save even the most highly tense motorsport event. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Yeah, this event, I mean, it was well criticized from the beginning, obviously. If there's a lesson to remind yourself through all of this, and I have learned this over and over again in my career in racing, is that everybody loves to be a doomsdayer, right? And people love rooting for chaos or predicting chaos. I don't know if that goes to our human nature of survival, right? Where we always predict the worst. And so when you go into these new events, there's always people predicting the worst. We saw this with the Chicago street course race in NASCAR, people predicting that there was all these horrible things that were going to happen. And we saw that going into the Vegas F1 race. We were part of those conversations ourselves last week on this pod of just, what's going to happen, right? And the potential chaos. And I would say for the chaos, those rooting for chaos, it didn't disappoint. But David Coulthard was saying before the weekend that it was going to be so cold they couldn't put cars on the track, right? And I think not that I talked to David Coulthard, but I think that didn't I say at the end of our pod last week, there's chill out. I think they'll put the cars on the track. It's not going to be too cold. So you had everything from that to, just all these local rumors and things about the venue not being ready or being inconvenient. And I don't doubt the truth of a lot of those things. I wasn't there. We're going to hear some of this from Joe Pompliano here in just a little bit, but it is interesting how you get into that stuff and the show does go on, and it is a first year event in a pretty special and unique venue, as the logistics are not easy. But the race happened and it was a good race for F1. And it will happen again, likely, and that's just
it will definitely happen again. They announced that the tickets were on sale for the 2024 event already. So, I mean, the criticism of this event was the who's it for, right? It's so damn expensive, so it's not for the true racing fan, apparently, quote unquote. It's the race is starting at 1 a.m. on the East Coast, so who are they really going for in terms of TV viewers? I was playing golf the Sunday after, and this two guys were talking about the race, and they were big F1 fans. They'd been to Monaco. They were NASCAR fans. They'd raced sprint cars when they were younger, and they basically were like, "This wasn't for us being up at 1 a.m." Sort of thing. And I was like, "Well, they kind of do that already around the world." So some of the criticism for sure was warranted. Here's the crazy part. Now that we're in Wednesday, we're not going to go into the race and that sort of stuff because I don't think we need to be dissecting the race this many days later. You saw it. It was a good race, a lot of passing. But looking at the bigger picture, I think one of the biggest wins they had, which I did not expect, I don't think anyone in the sporting world expected, they had 1.3 million people tune into this thing. Now, primarily on the West Coast was their main markets, but 1.3 million put it in the top 4 F1 races of all time, I believe, in America in terms of TV ratings. So they got what they wanted. It had the attention. It put them in the American culture, and it achieved having every Hollywood person who's been at Silverstone and Monaco already show up to this Vegas one. And get them people talking about it, and people watched. Now, here's the funny part. I love this. So every motorsport race, and this is pretty much most TV and most sporting events, the TV rating goes up as you get to the crescendo of the end of event. That's the highest TV rating. So like a NASCAR race, the most people watching are going to be that last 30 minutes at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how it works, no matter what race, no matter what you're doing. Well, the F1 race had its peak viewership at 1 a.m. at the start. 1.5 million. Went down from there. So, 3 a.m. isn't the best viewing time for TV. And, you can make jokes about the most exciting time in F1 race usually being the start. But I thought that was kind of interesting with this whole timing of what they did with this event.
Is it kind of backwards from NASCAR, where NASCAR, the peak viewership is at the end? F1, it's like you've got to catch the start. Yeah. Otherwise you've missed everything.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. On this one, I mean, here's the funny part. If all you did was watch the first lap, so I fell asleep, but I watched like the first 11 laps. I saw Leclerc lose the lead to Max Verstappen at the beginning. I woke up, Leclerc was passing Perez for second on the last lap, and Max Verstappen won. If that's all you saw Max Verstappen take the lead in turn 1 and win the race. And I was like, wait a second, this is actually hilarious. That would be most F1 races. That was not the case in this one, but that would be most F1 races. So just kind of, yes, there's all the jokes to make about F1 being that, but I think it was better than that.
I mean, I'm as a little bit of a cynic of that race, and we joke about F1 tourism. I was surprised and impressed by the viewership numbers there for that race. Also, what's going on in Greenville?
So that's interesting. So one of the top markets, and the only East Coast market that was watching the F1 race was Greenville. Well, Greenville is also the number one market for NASCAR, and it will be one of the number one markets for Indy 500. That is basically the North Carolina, Charlotte area, that sort of thing. It's just the racing hub of America in that sense, in terms of race fans. And the best part about this, Marty Snyder always says this because this is where he's from, is that when we go to Martinsville, they're like the most knowledgeable race fans. The place packs out. There's 50,000 people, 60,000 people, whatever it is. And they're so knowledgeable that when we do those post-race interviews and they pump it up to the PA, they know who to cheer for, who to boo, that sort of thing. And it's like they just understand racing. And you'll notice it when you're on the ground there, meeting the fans and how involved they are and that sort of thing. And so it was interesting to see that be the number one or the only market on the East Coast that was in the top 10 markets for the F1 race viewership, because those are just dedicated race fans. There was no NASCAR. This was the racing they watched. There was no IndyCar. This was it. Greenville. That's where it's at, man. If you want
it's
racing.
Like the bellwether for motorsports ratings. It's always one of our top markets
in
NASCAR.
It's they know motorsports. They love it. Hey, if you're watching this right now, send it to a friend. Tell everyone out there, come join us here on the Money Lap Live. If you're listening in podcast form, we hope you enjoy it. We hope you join us in the next Money Lap Live coming up. Just a reminder, here in about 10 minutes or so, we got Joe Pompliano coming on. We got James Hinchcliffe later in the show, and the winner of the South Carolina 400 late model race, Kade Brown, up-and-comer in the stock car realm. This is Money Lap Live. So one interesting thing that happened at Vegas that we can dissect now on a Wednesday, because I believe one of the people in this, and I'm not going to say who of these two people, may be coming on Money Lap Live here in the next week or two. Lewis Hamilton and Denny Hamlin met. We have photographic evidence of this meeting. It was then posted that they maybe were discussing by Chase Holden here the pitch that Lewis should come race at 2311, maybe in that 67 car, kind of like, the idea of coming and trying some NASCAR out, maybe the Daytona 500. I know Lewis has mentioned that before. Denny then responded to this saying that wasn't it. This was the peak of the pitch. Shaking hands. Is a deal done? Is Lewis Hamilton coming to NASCAR, possibly to the Money Lap Live? Maybe it's Denny coming on. I don't know. but we'll have to figure that one out. You'll have to just tune in and see which of those two is coming on our show.
If you were Lewis Hamilton, what race would you want to come run?
Daytona 500. Why not? Just do the biggest.
I think I'd agree.
He might. It'd be a huge win all around.
I mean, he might think that he wants to run a road course.
Nah,
but I don't think he wants to.
He's bigger than that.
I think Brody Kostecki kind of spoiled that.
You mean Shane?
Or Shane? Why did I say Brody Kostecki?
Well, he did well at Indy. Yeah,
that's right. Shane Van Gisbergen, SVG. That's right. I think Shane might have. I think he caught lightning in a bottle there, and probably spoiled it for everybody else. I think that if you're Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, any of these guys that like flirt with wanting to run NASCAR, I think you want to come run Daytona. It's gonna be just as hard, and you're probably 100%. It might be harder. I don't know. You're probably less likely to win Daytona 500 than you are, Watkins Glen or Road America or whatever.
Hold on. Let's just think about this from a purely number standpoint. Most famous race car driver in the world right now, Lewis Hamilton. No doubt in my mind. Most watched motorsport event in America for the last 20 years.
NASCAR would much rather Lewis run the Daytona 500.
Daytona 500.
To start the season.
Hold on. Possibility.
20 million people would watch that race.
20 million. I think 20 million people. The viewership out of England would be huge. Worldwide, it would be. So I've had some discussions with a certain owner who started this initiative of having international drivers come and drive a car in the NASCAR Cup Series. You can figure out who that is. He may or may not have mentioned the name Lewis Hamilton occasionally as a dream scenario. If you're going to do a race, just do it big. And guess what? I'm just going to be honest. It's not the most difficult thing for him to qualify for the race. It's not the most difficult thing for him to figure out, at least to be able to run competitively, right? Somewhat in the drafting. There is nuances for him to win and that sort of thing to get to the top 10 that would be very difficult and understand the cars and that sort of stuff. But I'm just saying in terms of purely the idea of like, you could show up, he will qualify, he'll be there. He has this opportunity to make sure that, he's in, that sort of thing. The Daytona 500 is built for this. It is made for Lewis Hamilton to come over if he's going to do a NASCAR race and do the Daytona 500. And I think that'd be epic. It'd just be awesome. It'd be huge.
I agree. He'd be, I don't want to say wasting his time, but to try to run COTA or Chicago or something, I think he'd be doing himself a disservice. Just run Daytona.
If he did do it with the idea that if he had promoted from the beginning, I'm going to be doing the Daytona 500, I think you'd still get the draw. Like if he goes and does a COTA or does a Chicago, kind of like Shane, and gets to this, point of saying, hey, I'm going to do these races to get ready, then I could see that being a thing. Max Verstappen has talked about it too, by the way.
Who would he drive for?
Red Bull doesn't have a situation right now. No, they don't. They don't have a relationship. So, 2311. Travis Pastrana.
I mean, what do you think what do you think?
But he'd have to be in a Ford. Probably.
You think Max would have to be in a Ford?
Well, they're going to Ford at Red Bull.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what do you think from a business perspective, what are some of the obstacles that Denny would have? Let's just talk about Denny in 2311 for a second to get Lewis into a car. Manufacturer obstacles, partnership stuff.
The best thing they got going. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Monster Energy. That's huge. You got that. You got manufacturer, but Toyota and Mercedes, I'm sure they would let it all go. That's the biggest thing. I think the biggest obstacle possibly is Lewis, being at a point where he's maybe done with Formula One and wants to do this, right? I think in the time that he's still a full-time F1 driver, I don't know if I see this happening, right? Why lose focus? Why not stay involved in what he's doing, trying to win an 8th world championship. And then when he's done with that, hey, let's go try this. This will be fun, So I think this works for him. We're still, just a reminder, Joe Pompliano coming on, sports business guy, huge following on Twitter. He was in F1 Las Vegas. Looking forward to having him. So that will be great when he comes on. We'll jump into that. Yeah. It's gonna
What
be fun.
are we going to talk
fun.
to Joe about here? I mean, he's kind of an expert on everything. He's always got the insights. We're going to get his kind of man on the ground view of things from Vegas. I want to ask him a little bit about, we talk about F1 tourism in the U.S. Kind of get some thoughts there.
He fits. Yeah, I think, one of the coolest things about him is he definitely understands the financials behind all this. That's his big thing is sports business, financials. So I want to know more about the financials of this race, what the feedback was on that. They spent, I think, $600 million on this deal. And this is a huge, I don't know if we've ever seen investment. The numbers being thrown around for Chicago, the NASCAR street race was $50 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that number is 10x lower than this. So let's see if this is a possibility that, can they make that back? Or is this a massive investment they can't get back is the question, Anyway, we mentioned it. I think he's here. Let's just give a quick intro for those that don't know. He's become a leader in the sports business world. He's invested in some of those groundbreaking tech companies in the world. He has over 500,000 loyal disciples on Twitter. He's the host of the Joe Pomp Show. It's Joe Pompliano on the Money Lap Live. Thank you, buddy, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Before we jump into all the F1 Vegas stuff, just a little bit of a background on yourself, how you became so well known for sports business on Twitter in the last couple of years. It's been an amazing rise, and sort of what got you into F1.
I love it, man. Thank you for the introduction. Disciples was one way to describe followers, but I love it. Yeah. So, by the way, thanks for having me, guys. I followed you both on Twitter for a while now, and I like what you guys are doing. It's cool that you're doing it live, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you. Let's start with who am I? I used to work at JP Morgan. I grew up with 4 brothers. I love sports, everything you could imagine, basketball, football, baseball, and so forth. And I thought I wanted to work in sports for a long time. So I interned at a sports agency in college. I realized that it was super difficult to be able to do if you didn't know someone already, or if you didn't already have kind of a connection in the industry. So I went to work at JP Morgan in New York City after graduation. And after like 4 to 5 years of that, I realized pretty quickly that's not what I wanted to do long-term. So I literally just started writing on the internet. I was writing a newsletter and I started tweeting. I think this was probably in 2020, at the beginning of 2020. And it just went better than I expected. And, I ended up quitting my job 6 months later, and now I do this full time. It's a mix of, all digital content stuff, newsletter, podcast, social media, everything like that. And it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
It's awesome. So what I've noticed a lot of Formula One content these days on your Twitter, and for you've sort of gotten into it, and you mentioned being an F1 fan. What got you in F1? When did you discover it, and what made you gravitate towards F1?
Yeah, so it wasn't always F1 specifically. I grew up, my dad was an IndyCar fan. I've been to the Indy 500 probably like 10 to 12 times, if I had to guess. Just like every year I grew up in North Carolina, and we used to just drive up there and go to the race because my dad loved it. So that eventually morphed into, we started watching F1 together and everything. And then over the last few years, specifically when Drive to Survive came out, my girlfriend at the time, started really enjoying it too. So it's become like this fun thing. We're able to watch it together. And I obviously enjoy kind of the racing part and the engineering and everything else like that. But it's something where, we can go to races together. We watch it on TV, and it's been something that one of the sports that we're able to enjoy together. So that's been fun.
It's awesome.
Yo, F1 is a perfect fit for your type of content, focusing on the business and the numbers of it all. It's a really attractive sport. The numbers are flashy as well. The brands are flashy. So it makes good conversation when it comes to the business. And there was probably nothing more extravagant to dive into than this Vegas GP and the experience around it all. What did you learn out there, and what kind of stood out to you about the business structure of this event, and can it survive?
So I want to preface this by like, my experience wasn't necessarily like everyone else's, right? I wrote up this post on Twitter and everything else, and some people were like, "Yeah, you stayed at the Wynn, you were in the Paddock Club, like obviously you had a great time." And I certainly think that's part of it, right? Like depending on the experience and the tickets and the access that you have, that certainly can change your mindset around how an event went. So like that's all fair. I totally get that. But I just felt like there was a huge divide between what I was seeing online and versus what I was experiencing on the ground, and my experience with the race. And I think the best place to start with this is just like the structure of Formula One in general and how the business works. Some of you may know and some of you may not, but like Formula One is basically just like a licensing business to some degree, right? Like they don't own the cars, they don't own the racetracks, they don't, pay the drivers, they don't do any of that stuff. Some of that comes through other avenues, but essentially what they do is countries all over the world pay them anywhere between like $20 million for a race like Monaco to $50 to $60 million for Abu Dhabi or somewhere else like that, right? So then they just bring the circus to town. They license them everything. The cars show up, the teams show up, and they put on the race with the FIA. And this is great because they don't have to necessarily go and sell tickets. They don't have to manage the racetrack itself. They don't have to talk to the vendors or anything else like that. It's awesome. And then they just go out and they sell TV broadcasts and high-level sponsorships, and they make a bunch of money. But what's happened over the last few years, specifically with Liberty Media, is Liberty Media came in and they're like, okay, we're making a little bit of money this way. We now have cost under control with, the cost cap that we put in place. We've done some things with Netflix and other stuff like that to bring fans in. But if we really want to make money, we got to start hosting these races ourselves, right? And put up some of our own money to develop the races and go sell tickets and sponsorships and basically cut out the middlemen. So Vegas was like that first experience for them. And I'm sure they learned a lot, right? Like some things obviously went terribly wrong. I was sitting there in FP1 and I was like, so excited when the cars came out. We're all sitting there overlooking the pits. And then 9 minutes later, everything shuts down for 3 hours. And I'm like, all right, this sucks. And like, to be fair, they kicked fans out and it was a shit show. Right. And like, I think that really left a sour taste in people's mouths, specifically when you're paying hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars to attend this race. And you watch 9 minutes of racing. I met someone who drove 10 hours to the race. Right. And it's like, okay, if you're only going to Friday's session or Thursday's session in this case, then you're probably pretty pissed. So like, that sucks. I totally get it. But I just felt like the race specifically on Friday and Saturday went better than a lot of people were giving it credit for. And I think the thing about F1 is, and you guys know this, like F1 hasn't really succeeded in the US previously because it's more European based, of course, but there's better options here in the US too, when it comes to IndyCar and NASCAR and other motorsports, that specifically around not only access, right? Those events take place during the middle of the day and in the evening rather than the early hours, but also pricing wise, right? Like you can go to these events for much cheaper than you can in Formula One, and Formula One attracts this like corporate and exclusive luxury type of audience. So I think people were visiting places on the strip and going to, other hotels or other restaurants, and they weren't seeing them packed. And they're like, okay, this wasn't really worth it for Las Vegas. But I would argue that the higher end places where people are paying $5,000 to go to the race, they're going to go to those restaurants, and those places seemed plenty packed from what I was able to tell.
Interesting. And that was going to be my next question, is basically on those earlier days, that was one of the criticisms I heard, is that there just wasn't a lot of people, right? Like that was, there was a sense, there was photos of empty grandstands, even on I don't know if you were there for the opening ceremony event. So, I think that's part of where there's some of that room for criticism, right? Now, you being on the ground, you're like, actually, because it's not, how many of those people that can afford to do this are really there? I did read a report that some of the casinos said they had some of their highest handles ever, right? In terms of bets and that sort of thing, because these are high net worth individuals who were able to enjoy this event. Did it still feel big? Did it feel big on the ground there without that amount of people?
It did. It did. And like going back to your point about the casinos, like one guy gave a $400,000 tip at the win on Saturday night, right? So like that's the type of people that are there at the Formula One race. And granted, some of this happens in Vegas regardless.
Was that you?
But a 400,000? No, it was. I wish.
No,
It was
okay.
me.
I just want to make
If I
sure.
was given a
Yeah.
$400,000 tip, I probably wouldn't be on the podcast, to be honest. I'd be doing something else with my time right now.
Not
Yeah.
offended.
No
I wouldn't be
offense.
on the podcast either.
No offense, guys, but if I was giving out $400,000 tips, I'd probably be on a boat somewhere and just hanging out. But, yeah, no. To answer your
Agreed.
question, I thought it was packed. I went to so in the last year or two, I went to Miami and we saw FP1 there and Monza, and Vegas was more packed with those on FP1. And I think the thing that people have to remember is like FP1, it's never packed, right? Like nowhere you go in the world is FP1 packed for Formula One. It's just not. There's empty seats everywhere. So I think what you saw on Twitter was like people took a screenshot of the empty grandstands on Thursday night and they're like, oh, look, this race is empty. And the reality was if you took a video of the start finish line, it was standing room only. And they had luxury box suites that were selling for $13,000 a seat that were completely packed, right? So like, you know, there's always some nuance to this type of thing. But I think that people in general were expecting, specifically within Las Vegas, we're expecting like this huge crowd of people because they had to put up with traffic for 6 to 12 months. None of them, well, not none of them, but certainly some of them were priced out from attending the race, even as locals. There wasn't a great option for them pricing wise. So I think there was a little bit of that, like from an anger standpoint. But to me, yeah, it felt plenty busy. And again, the high ticket places, the Wynn, the restaurants like that, the casino floors, they were plenty busy. I was joking with, so I'm sure you guys saw the Formula One car, Lewis Hamilton's car. I think it was 2013, sold at auction. I think the Wynn probably had over $50 million worth of cars like on the casino floor during the week. They had the Hamilton's car was sold for, I think, 18 million. They had one of those Hennessy Venom Roadsters that's like 3 or 4 million. They had a Mercedes Roadster that was like 10 or 15 million. They had a bunch of different cars that Sotheby's was auctioning off. And all those things sold live there on the floor. So like, you know, there's plenty of people that were spending money in and around Vegas during that week.
I think one thing that's interesting about this Vegas event, and it to me, as I wouldn't call myself a racing purist, but I'm very aware of it because I've been racing my whole life. So, you know, I'm pretty well in tune with what racing purism is and know what it looks like. And, you know, with Formula One, we've seen this astronomical growth in interest, in public interest in F1, particularly in the United States. We all pretty much know why. I think it's this joining of Netflix, and then also our culture right now is just so responsive to the luxuries of things, right? And money, and F1 is perfectly positioned for that with their branding. You know, unlike NASCAR being this kind of blue collar idea of a sport, F1 is this exclusive luxury sport. So you pair that with Drive to Survive and everything, and you have the U.S. interest. And Parker and I, you may have heard us joke about it. The motorsports tourism is what we kind of call it, right? Because you have all these American F1 tourist fans that, you know, became fans during this era, and then the question is, are they tourists or are they going to stick? Do they become interested in the racing, or are they there for the exclusivity part of it? And so it seems like the Las Vegas F1 race was this culmination of the exclusivity part of it, right? And Max Verstappen even sort of expressed his frustration over the course of the weekend that it wasn't a purist racetrack. It wasn't a purist race. You know, people being mad that FP1 was canceled is like, you know, and wanting their money back from those tickets. I've never heard of somebody wanting their money back from tickets from a practice, right? Like practices get canceled all the time for weather, or there's oil on the track, or like, you know, that's like a racing thing. That's just the most racing thing to happen. You know, it's the first race.
Well,
and
the drain stuff, I mean, you guys know this. The drain stuff, like this happens at racetracks, right? Like specifically street tracks. Like this is a given thing that could happen at one point or another.
Right.
So I get it, but the idea that you're going to issue a refund is kind of crazy in my mind. I was even surprised, honestly, that they did the $200 voucher, right? Like, you're setting a precedent then that if something doesn't go well weather-wise, that you're going to give the fans some sort of relief. And that's never been the case really in any any sports league. And I was surprised they did that. But yeah, look, dude, I get the complaints. Like, Max was complaining one day and then he's singing Viva Las Vegas in the car the next day, right? So it's like things can change.
From
ahead.
your perspective, you know the sport well, and like you said, I know you've gone to the Indy 500 with your family and your brothers and your dad for your whole life, and but you have this really keen. I think that you have a really keen perspective on the business of the sport, and also you have your finger on the pulse of just the energy, right, and the culture of around all sports and social media and where people's interests are headed, and I think that's something you're really good at. So what is your perspective on balancing, the pure side of F1 racing, but also this really trendy interest that our country has in it? Is it weaning? Is it going away? What happens if it goes away? Like, how much of it's going to stick? I kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the viewership numbers, I think, are down like 6% this year. That was before the Vegas race. So like, it's sitting, it's not growing as much as it was, if not declining a little bit. And I think part of that obviously has to do with the domination that we've seen in Formula One. Like, people always joke about Formula One and new people to motorsports. They're like, oh, Formula One is the best sport ever. And I'm like, kind of. I mean, like, the competition itself is not nearly as competitive. You have to be into the engineering and the aerodynamics and the personalities of the sport and the show and everything else like that to really gain an appreciation for it. If you just want to see people pass on track, like, there's other sports motorsports that you should be watching. But I think that specifically in the United States, one of the things I wrote about the other day was that there's this huge divide between how fans, traditional fans of Formula One, see Liberty Media and what they've done to the sport versus what people inside the sport see as Liberty Media. And the example I gave was I was talking to Jefferson Slack, who's the managing director, but essentially runs the Formula One Aston Martin team. And he called Liberty Media the best operator in sports. And he literally said that he thinks they saved the sport. Because if you think about what Formula One was in 2016, 2017, teams were spending $500, $600 million a year. They were all losing money. You could have bought a team. Literally, they were selling for $1. Right? Because of the amount of investment that they would have taken to get going. And companies like Ferrari and Mercedes and all these other teams were just using it as a marketing vehicle, Red Bull, etc. And it wasn't sustainable, right? And what they did was they did a bunch of different things, obviously with Netflix and everything else, but they implemented a cost cap, which made these teams profitable. Now they trade like real sports franchises, multiple, if not several of them trade around $1 billion today, and their values have gone up tremendously. So they've made the sport sustainable, which I think is great. But the thing that Formula One or Liberty Media is looking at now is like, if you want to continue to grow, and every sport looks at this, right? If you look at the NBA, they're doing the in-season tournament. If you look at the NFL, they're going to have their first ever Black Friday game this week. They're all trying to innovate, right? And they're trying to innovate at a pace which is faster than every other sports league to continue to gain momentum. But the thing that you have to be careful about is like, where does that line get crossed? And I think with Vegas, we saw this where they're continuing to innovate, right? This race, no other promoter in the world on this planet would have done this race because they invested $500-600 million of their own money off their own balance sheet to make this happen. They built a 300,000 square foot permanent paddock. Like, no one else would have done this because of the risk reward. If you don't sell tickets, if you don't sell sponsorships, it's going to take them a decade plus to make their money back and so forth, right? So I think that's part of it where they deserve credit. Now, there's certainly some things that I would call cringe, like, them rising up during the opening ceremony and having DJs play and fireworks and like, it is what it is. Bruce Buffer getting in Checo's face and yelling and screaming at him. And like, it was just funny, right? But I think like that's where you figure out where that line is and what people are willing to put up with. And maybe some of that changes for next year, right? So like, I don't necessarily blame Liberty Media. I think they probably deserve a little bit of more slack than people are willing to give them because of what they've done to the sport over the last few years. But I could certainly understand why someone like Max would be upset with the show, right? I was watching all of his sound bites, and being on the ground, it's a little bit more difficult to keep up with the press conferences than it maybe was on social media. But I was seeing these things of him calling it like a clown show. He was saying it's 99% show, 1% sport, or whatever it was. He likened Monaco to the Champions League and Vegas to the National League. He told the people to tear down the place for not receiving their money back. Like, it was just all over the place, right? He was on one all weekend. But then my wife actually showed me a clip of his where it was like 2.5 minutes. and he was just talking about why he prefers other racetracks over Vegas. And it was actually super interesting. If anyone hasn't heard it yet, you guys should go watch it, because he's just basically like, I grew up watching this sport and I grew up loving this sport based on emotion as a driver. He's like, I just love driving the car. I love the emotions of driving the car. I love the emotions of the sport. I don't love the show of the sport. I never have. And he's like, I don't like street courses, right? I'd rather push the car to the limit on courses that were designed specifically for F1 cars. And he's like, I love Vegas. I have nothing against Vegas. I'll come here party. I'll come get drunk. I'll do all of that. But it's just not my favorite race. And I think when you hear it in that context, it's a lot more understandable than the sound bites of like clown show, right? And I would argue that a lot of the drivers probably understand, the show aspect of it too. They're more popular than they ever have before. They're making more money than they ever have before. They're essentially global celebrities now, even in the United States. And all of that eventually goes back to Liberty Media too.
Yep. So I think his actual terminology was getting shit-faced in Ibiza.
Yeah, he said, if I want to do that, I could just go to Ibiza.
Yeah, get shit-faced, or Ibiza, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
I think that was a great summation of where F1 is. I think one of the things you have a amazing perspective on, and you mentioned a little bit, what do the other sports? You cover NFL and obviously all the other sports in the United States. What is their view on what F1 has done? What are you noticing them talking about or taking notes of that they're trying to apply? Because you said it, the Aston Martin guy said basically it's they're the best operator in sports. And to your point, F1 teams were valueless and now are in the billions just a couple of years later. This is one of the most remarkable, turnarounds in probably all sports that there's been ever, maybe.
Yeah, I think one thing that pops in mind is obviously just Drive to Survive, right? If you look at different sports leagues, content has become extremely important, not only from a dollar perspective. Companies like Amazon, Apple, and everyone else are looking for sports content. We know that's the most popular stuff on live television today. So if streaming companies want to get more popular, but they don't have live rights, Netflix doesn't own any live rights, right? But they go out and they do these documentaries on obviously Formula One. They have Full Swing. They have one on the Tour de France. They have a bunch of others too, right? So like they've done a really good job at that. And my argument to that is like, that's not necessarily new, right? If you think about those shows, Hard Knocks is really one of the first ones that I can think of. The NFL's been doing Hard Knocks for years at this point. And I think they've done a really good job too. But the biggest differentiator in my mind is that Formula One and Netflix specifically just did a really good job of encapsulating everything that culture cares about today, right? It's the drama, it's the money behind the sport, it's the celebrity status, it's the races, it's they're essentially like music festival style races now, which is good or bad depending on how you look at it. But I just think that partnering with Netflix was really smart, and that's something that other leagues, whether it's Netflix or someone else, are now trying to copy and emulate on their own.
I think one thing is such a good point. I'm glad you said that. And I'm glad you talked about innovation, F1's innovation and motorsports innovation in general and other sports innovating. Because with what you just said kind of makes me think, if I wanted to make an argument for why the Las Vegas Grand Prix is not necessary, right? Or maybe even a misstep or wasn't, let's just say not necessary, is motorsports has always needs any sport, but motorsports needs to lean into what it's good at, right? And what Netflix and F1 did a really good job is leaning into the sub stories of what's really going on, because in motorsports it's not just the drivers, as opposed to basketball. And just bear with me for a second, because I know there's coaching staff and I know there's all kinds of things, there's deeper things than just the players, but the players are the ones that hold the ball and shoot it and play, right? But in motorsports, you have the car and you have the teams, you have the engineering behind it. And so I feel like motorsports does a really good job when we present content that just goes deeper, right? And so Formula One and Netflix knock that out of the park. But what's difficult with motorsports is being innovative on the actual event, right? Because a motorsports event takes a huge amount of property and a huge amount of logistics and people to build a racetrack or to build a street course or to, execute on that. And we've been doing street courses for decades in motorsports, but it's still not an easy thing to do, where, basketball, hockey, football. I mean, there's stadiums in every city, and yeah, they're spending billions of dollars to build new ones constantly, but it almost seems like it's a little easier and more acceptable to local communities to build a stadium to have a football game or a basketball game or a soccer match, and those facilities can be repurposed the rest of the time, as opposed to building a temporary street course or even a permanent race course. So you could maybe make this argument that, like, hey, why is a street race in F1 necessary in Vegas when we, continue to lean into the things that we are actually good at?
I'm not intentionally doing anything over here, but my microphone went out, which is why I had it muted for a second.
No worries.
But yeah, I totally agree. Like, one of the things that I was thinking about too was a lot of people were very upset with what was happening on the ground, right? If you talk to a Vegas resident over the last year, they hate Formula One. They absolutely hate Formula One. Part of it was because, it took them 2 hours to commute to work on a commute that usually took 20 to 30 minutes because of the traffic and the road closures and everything else like that. So that's certainly part of it. But then they didn't even get to enjoy the race. There was no like optional ticket package for locals to attend the race at a discount. If you wanted to go, you were paying the normal ticket price like everyone else, which on a secondary market, I think the average 3-day ticket price was $1,600, right? So it's a very expensive race to attend. But my argument to that would be like, it'll get better each year from here, right? As long as the road closures aren't as bad as year one. They already built the paddock, which is obviously a big part of it. And then I think for Formula One, it's just like it's a really good marketing race for them, is what we'll call it, right? Like, the race ended up being pretty good itself, but I would argue it's more about what it does for the sport holistically from a marketing perspective. And if you look at what they're going to be doing over the next decade, I actually asked Jefferson from Aston Martin about this. I said, if you had to look at 2030, how many races do you think are on the Formula One calendar, and how many do you think Liberty Media is hosting? So I think they had 22 races this year, 24 next year. He thinks that by 2030, they'll have 25 races. He thinks that's just the cap. Logistically, you can't really do much else because of how the sport travels kind of all over the world. And I think I largely agree with that. But he said that he doesn't think they're going to promote themselves more than 3 races, right? So, 3 out of 25 is really sort of insignificant still. Vegas being one of those, and then maybe 2 others, whether that's them building their own races themselves or taking over for race promoters that are financially insolvent or just don't want to do it anymore. So, like, from a purist standpoint, I don't think the sport is going to be changing that much over the next 5, 6, 7 years. I think that Liberty Media is just going to take a little bit more hands-on approach with a certain number of races. And that's ultimately good for the sport, right? If you look at the United States, these races get 70, 80 million viewers every single race, and only 1 million comes from the United States. So there's still a lot of room to run relative to the rest of the world. And I think that's ultimately what Liberty Media is focused on.
So I'm glad you brought viewers, because I wanted to go there. But before we do, real quick, I just have a quick financial question, in that this race cost them what, $600 million in total? Was that the number basically floating around out there? Do you believe they have a possibility of making that back over the next 10 years from this race? Is that possible with the tickets? Yeah. And it is? Okay.
Yeah,
so
I think they'll make it
can
back.
achieve that.
I mean, yeah, they already have. It was like a 3-year. It's kind of like weird how they did it. Part of me feels like it was like sort of a handshake deal with Las Vegas, because you don't build a. They spent $240 million on just the land. Like, if you guys looked at the land where the paddock is now, it was just an empty dirt parking lot that's like a few blocks away from the strip. So they spent $240 million on that, another $100+ million to build it, $600 million on the whole race. And you're not spending that just for 3 years, right? So the initial agreement is for 3 years, but Clark County, aka Las Vegas, essentially guaranteed them use of the strip, they call it, for a decade, whatever use of the strip means. But yeah, so it'll at least be here for probably 10 years. My guess it'll be here for much longer. And every year, they're going to start chipping away at that investment. And, my guess is they're not stupid. They projected out a certain number of years and a financial return that they'll have in place to be able to make this race worth it from a pure investment perspective.
That makes sense. So you mentioned viewership. The most watched F1 race in America was the Miami GP this year. I think roughly around 1.5 million. The Daytona 500 is just around 9 million this past year. The Indy 500 was over 5 million. Those are 5 and 10x almost larger than Formula One. Yet right now, judging from what you see on social media and such, F1 is winning the culture war. You mentioned you've been to the Indy 500. You went as a kid. How do NASCAR and IndyCar tap into what F1 has done? How do they take this interest and get people that obviously suddenly like cars going in circles and say, hey, here's what our offering is, in your opinion? You, being someone that likes Formula One, has seen IndyCar, how do we get you to start tuning into a NASCAR race? Or is there a way? Or is it not possible?
No, it's definitely possible. I think that if I had to pick out two things that Formula One's done really well, and if you look at every sports league that's growing, these seem like common threads throughout all of them, is they're promoting the stars of the sport really well. So the athletes, the drivers in this case. If you look at the NFL, right, in most cases, and the NBA specifically does this really well, they promote the athletes more than the teams in the leagues, right? So if you look at an NBA advertisement today, almost always it's about individuals rather than the teams or the league itself. And this is the league spending money on these promotions, right? It's obviously not the athletes or the teams. So I think that they're doing a really good job because the data tells us, there's a bunch of different studies that have come out over the last few years, and it's individuals now care, younger people care about individuals rather than teams and leagues. And the example I always like to give is that I grew up watching the New York Giants on TV because my dad grew up in New Jersey.
Go Giants!
He was a Giants fan. And yeah, and that's what we did together, right? And I'm assuming you guys are the same and most people are that way. But today it's changed where Odell Beckham Jr. has more followers than anyone else in the NFL. He has like 16 or 17 million followers on Instagram today. It's drastically more than anyone else in the NFL. So a young kid today who owns his jersey would have been a fan of the Giants. He would have been a fan of the Browns. And now he's a fan of the Ravens, right? He was a fan of the Rams at a standpoint too. And, you know, if you go to the park, you'll see all these different sports jerseys, and it's very much centered around the athlete rather than the team or the league. So I think Formula One does a good job with that with Drive to Survive. I think the NBA does a good job of that. I think the NFL does a good job of that, and other sports leagues too. That's number one. Number two is I think some of these other sports leagues can do a much better job making events around their activities or their games, right? Formula One, like I said, with Liberty Media, used to show up to the race and it would essentially just be the race. Now there's concerts, there's great food, there's shows, there's a bunch of other things that go alongside with it. There's, you know, meet and greets with the drivers, which I know, you know, NASCAR and IndyCar do as well, but it really feels like more of an event rather than just you're going there for the race. Because if we're being honest, like people ask me about Formula One and other sports like that too all the time. And like, the races really aren't that great to attend because you're just seeing a little bit of the action right in front of you. And they're much better, in my opinion, at least to watch on TV. It's awesome to see the cars. It's awesome to hear them. It's awesome to see how fast they are in person. It's cool to get close to them. But you really only need to do that once or twice, and then you can just watch them on TV, and it's a much better viewing experience. So how do you get people to the racetrack? It's by creating events, giving them other reasons to be there, which again is concerts. It's the atmosphere. It's being around other people, being social and stuff like that. So these are the things that I think other sports leagues can probably do a little bit better if you were to try to look at Formula One and say, what can we take from them? What are they doing well?
Makes sense. Yeah, I think it's definitely been the prerogative of NASCAR and IndyCar to try and figure that out, to tap in and to get involved in the culture. So this has been awesome, man. We really appreciate you coming on the Money Lap Live. Before we let you go, we like to do a question of the day on these shows for each guest that comes on here. And we've got this one pretty simply. Given the choice, because both these events happen in Las Vegas this year, would you rather go to the Super Bowl or the Las Vegas GP in Las Vegas?
I would have picked the GP this year just because it was the first year. But I've been to one Super Bowl before. I went to the one in LA a few years ago, the Rams and the Bengals. And the Super Bowl is awesome, dude. The Super Bowl is great. I would love to go to another Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is so much fun. Just the week leading up to it, there's a bunch of different parties and events. The game itself is obviously awesome. And this year, I'm sure in Vegas, it's going to be just as big as ever. So maybe this year, Las Vegas, but next year, if the Super Bowl was coming back, I'd probably pick the Super Bowl.
Well, quick bonus question. Will we see you at the Daytona 500?
I was supposed to go there, actually. The guys at NASCAR hooked me up. I actually live in Charlotte now, so I'm pretty close to the headquarters, and I've become closer with some of the guys over there. And I was supposed to go last year, but something came up. I forget what it was. So hopefully this year or next year, I guess, you guys will see me there. Yeah.
Love it. Awesome. Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks for coming on here. That was awesome. Really informative. Look forward to following you. And as always, all the fans out there following this, go follow Joe Pompliano on Twitter. He's big on there and he's got amazing information. Thank you, man.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Joe.
Rock on. Man, that was informative. Very informative.
Yeah, it was great. I knew that
What
was going
racing
to.
show dives that
I
deep,
knew.
by the way.
I knew the knowledge was there. It was great to hear him talk, and very gracious of him to go that in depth for us, and to get his perspective. Like I said, we've had Jeff Gluck was on last week. We're gonna have James Hinchcliffe on here in a few minutes. So we've done great with racing endemic folks that can provide their perspective and experience, but to have a more of a business mind, a non-endemic to motorsports person kind of give us their outside perspective on this experience has been good.
Yeah, it's really cool. Really cool. We got a little bit of time before, James, so we mentioned some of the series we're going to dive into. Let's go into those. We've got stuff from the rally world, the World Rally Championship. I loved this announcement video from Kalle Rovanperä, who is the 2-time champ in the last 2 years in the World Rally Championship. He put out a video announcing he's going to be going part-time. We're going to put this up. You can listen to this if you're on the podcast as well. You'll obviously just be able to hear it. But this video I thought was very interesting. Do we have the sound? I don't know if we have the sound. Oh, no, we don't have the sound. All right. Well, never mind. This has been totally ruined. Anyway, I felt like, so many people who are fans of Kimi Räikkönen out there will know, and maybe Mika Häkkinen will know, some of the Finnish drivers out there are not the most personable on camera. And Kalle Rovanperä definitely fit that description in his announcement video, which seemed very stoic, was the way to put it. But anyway, really talented driver who the gist of it all, and what we can expand on, is that he felt like the schedule had gotten to him with the World Rally Championship. And so it doesn't matter what you're racing, whether it's in World Rally, NASCAR, Formula One, as Joe Pompliano just mentioned, F1 going to 25 races. I can already foresee many of the drivers saying, wait a second, which they've already talked about. That's a lot of damn races. So
he looks a little young to be schedule fatigued.
Well, they start very young, especially in the Finland area. You start like 12 or 13. So he's been in the backwoods and and deserts of many countries for a long time. The poor guy probably is like, I just want to see civilization for a little bit. And he's won the biggest thing there is already. So, he has that opportunity. Good for him. Schedule fatigue. By the way, if someone out there on the chat says, dude, you should see the World Outlaws schedule. Yeah, I've heard that. Oh, look, we have a thumbs down on your. Once again, Landon's camera decides to give us some sort of indication of his feelings. Was that your feeling of what I just said? You gave me a thumbs down?
I guess so. I don't know. We're going to see if my MacBook does more gesture stuff. So far, keep an eye on the
World Outlaws has. The World Outlaws has, what, is it 90 races or something crazy? Or over 100? If you do the whole schedule, something like 80 to 100, somewhere in there. I don't know. It's nuts. The crew guys don't have houses. They live in the shops, I think, often. They have apartments in the shops because they just don't have.
Now you're just making that up.
No, it's true. You never heard that?
I'm sure that they, a big Midwestern thing right now is everybody's building a shouse, which is like a shop house. So, you can build a race shop that has a house on the front of it. I don't know.
That's
it's the ultimate like man garage type thing. But
this is big on Instagram. It's got to be big on Instagram.
Shouse, yeah.
Yeah, I bet. We got to talk about something that happened in MotoGP, because this is quite an interesting video out there. Essentially, Alessio Spargaro and Franco Morbidelli got into an altercation at Qatar in practice. And Alessio Spargaro actually hit Franco Morbidelli in the head while they're riding MotoGP bikes in this video. If you haven't seen this, it's quite intense. These two getting angry at each other. And if you've never watched some of the Drive Survive style stuff about MotoGP, it's incredible. Those riders are insane. The bikes go over 200 miles an hour. I think they approached 220 at Mugello. I'm sorry. And it's just a wild sport. I've gotten to commentate on a little bit, but I'd never seen this in practice between two riders getting into it. You mentioned,
That's wild.
some of the like short track world getting crazy. This is MotoGP, the Grand Prix of motorcycles beating each other up in practice.
He looked like he was getting a talking to there in the paddock after the fact.
He did.
I wonder, was there any kind of blowback from this?
There was. So there was, he ended up getting a penalty. I believe it was $10,000, and was handed a sixth place grid penalty for Sunday's race. He ended up getting, so Alessio Spargaro then got hurt in the sprint race they had. So then was told he was fit to race on Sunday, which these guys all race hurt all the time. That's one of the things you'll learn when you watch MotoGP. They're always hurt, all of them. It's just wild. But then he, end quote, was given a bomb of drugs to numb the pain, but said the blood in his left leg created a compartment syndrome, like feeling that meant he wasn't able to properly shift the gears, and Alessio Spargaro had to retire from the Sunday race. Definitely loved the quote, bomb of drugs. That's a new one for me. I don't know how that's allowed, but yeah, there you go.
Those riders are definitely on another level. That's I think things you can do on a bike that you can't do in a stock car.
Have a bomb of drugs?
No, slap each other during practice.
I think this quote is so ridiculous. I couldn't get over it. That was so funny. In the sports car world, big announcement today. Mick Schumacher, son of Michael Schumacher, was announced that he'll be racing for Alpine in 2024 in the World Endurance Championship. He'll still be the reserve driver for the Mercedes F1 team, but gets to do sports cars as well. And for some of the listeners out there might not know this. So Michael Schumacher was in sports cars, essentially in what was the World Endurance Championship at the time, driving for Sauber before he got his big break into Formula One. So this is a similar history to his dad, although he did it a little backwards, going to Formula One first and then to sports cars. This is a history for the Schumacher family doing this, which would be fun to watch.
I think it's exciting to see him get some action.
Get racing. Those reserve drivers, I know it's so close to Formula One, and it's like being a backup QB without a huge opportunity you're going to get to race, right? Like that's a tough spot to be. And I've seen, we've seen this as a trend. They go race maybe in Formula E, or some do WEC and that sort of thing, because you got to stay current. You got to race as a driver. Otherwise,
right.
You lose it.
The only thing,
right?
I think, it's a pretty valuable position to be a reserve driver in F1. It does seem like those
I think they're paid well.
I think they're paid well. I think they do get their chances.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, for a driver like Mick, I mean, I think that there's probably a lot of people in the sport would love to see what he's capable of and what he can do. Kind of had to slog it out there at Haas F1. It's a guy that has got the name behind him and the experience now in those cars. So I think there's just a lot of interest to see what he's capable of, and he's right there at Mercedes with his testing. So
yeah, and I saw another thing that basically, if you win the F2 championship, you can't go back to F2 again, which is odd. It's not like the Xfinity Series; you can hang out there, sort of thing. Go back down, I believe. And there is some rules. I remember Nelson Piquet Jr. ran into that when he tried to do an F3 race. I think he tried to do F3 Macau or something, and he wasn't eligible because he had too much experience above F3, essentially.
Do you wear a stick-on mustache or something?
No. That's like the story about Kimi Räikkönen going and racing a snowmobile race in a gorilla suit, whatever. Yeah. And his name was James Hunt.
Oh my God.
Trying to hide because it was completely illegal. It was when he was at McLaren. It was completely against his contract, of course. But the guy was just a wild man. Didn't care. Did you ever go?
Oh my gosh.
Do something you weren't supposed to? I one time tried to have a motorcycle. That got stopped pretty quickly for me. You're not.
I think
admitting
Tony
anything.
Stewart didn't Tony Stewart race under what was Tony Stewart's what am I trying to say? Persona or doppelganger? What was his what did he race his indoor
He
races?
impersonate?
He,
I don't know.
yeah, he used to race unannounced.
Well, didn't he do the chump car like 24-hour race at VIR like that somehow in like a fake name? I think he did.
Sounds about right.
I think he did. That sounds right.
That
I mean,
sounds
that's cool. Why not? Good on them. Good on them. Some video for our podcast listeners. You won't get to see this, but if we got the sound, I don't know this time. But the Ford Mustang GT3 was testing at Misano. This thing looks awesome. This is one of their GT3 contenders. This is the sports car world. Is getting just overtaken with manufacturers going into the GT3 regulations. And so they had their new car out there, which is pretty sweet. And it does sound amazing. It's because, of course, it's a Mustang. So love that one. But I was seeing this on the internet and thought it was pretty cool. So
will we get a production version of this?
Yeah. So I
yeah.
believe so. That look at that thing. I mean, they're wild. The GT3 regulations have just lit up the sports car world in terms of manufacturer involvement because it's a fairly simpler thing for them to be involved because it allows them to be, because they become worldwide sort of the sports car regulation. You can make a car that can race in Europe and America and Asia and all over in all these different series. That wasn't really the case because for years you had the different GT, LM, GTE, all these regulations that made these different, GT1, GT2 before that. And it was so different regulation wise that you couldn't take a car that was racing in IMSA and go to Le Mans occasionally until they did a different ruling. And so it was all over the place. And so GT3 is basically just commonized, I don't even know if it's a word, across the board. And so now you have so many manufacturers that are involved. And, if you look at the GT Daytona and GT Daytona Pro at the Rolex, you're going to see 8 manufacturers, 9 now, possibly 10, I think even. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's impossible. I tried to race in a Rolex this year. Couldn't get a ride.
It's crazy how that's such a conversation in NASCAR, how we need more manufacturers. And we just have 3, right? And yet manufacturer interest in motorsports is going up, right? It's been going up.
Yeah. Everywhere but NASCAR. Everyone's got more.
Is it the barrier of entry? Is it the motor? Like, what is it? The engine? Like, what is it?
I think the new car has helped a ton. I think the old car was a huge detriment to NASCAR getting new manufacturers because of the way it had to be built and such. I think the engine technology is a barrier. I do believe that. I think if you had turbocharged engines similar to what you're going to see out of these IMSA cars,
right?
That's a whole new world. That's a whole new situation, right? I do believe some of them also are scared of the financial undertaking. I spoke to Mazda executives 2 years ago and said, "Hey, would you guys ever go there?" And they're like, "No," because they looked and they basically said it was going to cost them $100 to $150 million investment just to do NASCAR. Jeez. And so they just couldn't justify it, right? And that's the only thing at that level of pure startup investment is Formula One or like a WEC prototype program, right? Nothing else is really at that, and then NASCAR Cup. So I think the new car, with the rules, I do believe like a budget, scenario similar to what F1 has done would be helpful. Those sorts of things, because NASCAR is so unique compared to everything else in the racing world, but that car and this new car has sort of aligned it a little more, right? Where the understanding, the technology is similar to what's out there. So similar to what you see out of GT3 with this Mustang and all those manufacturers, does that allow someone to say, okay, now we can come in, especially if you change the motor architecture? A pushrod V8, naturally aspirated, not really on brand for anyone right now. Would you accept a different type of motor in NASCAR? A turbocharged?
100%.
Yeah. I think it'd be cool.
I mean,
what if they all sounded different?
Well, my saying, right? We either have too many rules or not enough.
Yep.
And so on one hand, it's like just make everything a crate engine and slap the branding on it. Let the manufacturers have a little bit of customization to the branding of the cars but standardize everything, or just turn it loose, right? And maybe have budget caps or something like that, so you don't spend too much money, but let them present whatever kind of car and engine they want. I think when it comes to engines, I've kicked around this theory and talked to people at NASCAR before about this idea of what if the manufacturers could build any kind of engine they wanted, right? Does not matter. Diesel, like whatever, VW could, whatever you wanted. But there's just parameters around it saying, maybe the manufacturer has to provide the engine to the team at a certain cost, right? Or just to control those costs. So I would love, I think it would be really interesting if the manufacturers could build any engine they wanted. Doesn't matter, V6, V8, supercharged, diesel, electric, like who cares? Just let them race.
Yep. And I wonder, one of the things that's happened in IMSA is the BOP. So that's like the balanced performance. Now that's one of the discussions that comes up when you open it up to different architectures, right? Because they have turbocharged V8s, V6s, 4 cylinders. They have a V8 there with Cadillac that's naturally aspirated in the prototype, and then in the GT3 category, the BOP thing is a huge discussion, and it is the most nauseating discussion because this past year, Porsche, the 911, won the year prior. Then this past year was way off the pace, and everyone thinks they're sandbagging and they're holding up, and so they want to get more, help from the series, more air, and then they get in the race and they're like 2 seconds a lap off. Like it was just like they were nowhere, right? That's what I get worried about when you talk different engines architectures. Like, do you end up where suddenly we're all playing this game of balanced performance and so on and so forth? And we've had this discussion before, right? And there's those that support balanced performance because it does create a better show. There's no doubt that some of the IMSA races are so close because you have such closely aligned cars because of the balanced performance.
It's kind of like our conversation of that I think we were starting to have on Instagram with Blake, our guest last week, on Instagram. Is that how you say it? Is that how he says this?
Blake break.
Where we were talking about data and should SMT live data, driver data, which will maybe this is a good conversation to have with James Hinchcliffe as well here in just a couple minutes. It looks like he's getting logged on. Does making racing, like balancing power, does it make for better racing? It does make for
balloons.
Does make for more balloons, I guess, behind me for whatever the gesture does.
Why does that happen?
Somebody needs to tell me what those gestures do. Does it actually make for better racing? Does more, parity is not the right word. What am I trying to say? Like evening the playing field, making the cars the same speed. Does that actually translate to better racing? I would go down this path of making this argument that it doesn't, right? And if all the drivers are driving the same laps and have access to the same data, it makes them copy each other. And, or, these drivers, my argument to Blake is like, hey, these drivers are so good and are so talented that when they look at the data and they see something that another driver is doing and it sparks an idea, they're good enough to adapt to it, right? And try it out. And if it just results in us, all going to Darlington and driving Darlington the same way, and our cars are identical and they're all set up the same way, then that's ultimately what happens and translates to no passing, right? And is that really good racing? Even if the cars are all close and go the same speed, but nobody overtakes, nobody passes, is that really good? So sometimes what makes racing good is when people can have an advantage and a secret and can take off with it.
And I think that is a great explanation of what NASCAR is going through right now. Think about the next gen car at short tracks, right? Martinsville. The field is separated by two tenths across the field, right? because the cars are so similar. The brakes allow you to brake so late. You downshift so in the corner so you can just mat the throttle on exit because there's not enough power to spin the rear tires. But Martinsville, its best race was when it was super slick this past race in the fall because it was 80 some odd degrees unseasonably, and it laid a ton of rubber, and there was just discrepancies in how you treated the car, the rear tires, and that caused some passing. But if it was cold and grippy, there would have not been a single pass, right? That's where it's almost like it's too close. You need some separation in cars. Denny Hamlin goes about this all the time. Might be on the Money Lap next week talking about this. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe the guy will come. I don't know. Denny, you out there? You want to come on? Let us know. Otherwise, Lewis is taking your spot, but we'll reserve it for you. So that to me is like where you've brought it. You can get too close. And that's so weird because forever all we want to be is like, it's the closest series in the world, or IndyCar, with spec car, essentially spec cars. Some of the closest fields you'll ever see out of street course or anywhere in road course racing is that field, separated by just a couple tenths, but it makes it hard to pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. That's always a problem. So, do we have a guest? Do we have another guest? Is he ready? Is he here? Oh, you know what? Well, without further ado, we've been talking about him. An IndyCar race winner, a star in the dancing world, a driver who has been impaled by his own race car only then to win the Indy 500 pole. I once watched NBC try and kill him for 16 hours straight on a broadcast of the Rolex 24, possibly the coldest Rolex 24 of all time. He's an F1 TV host. It's none other than James Hinchcliffe on the Money Lap Live. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you coming on.
Crowd goes wild. Man, quite an intro. Quite an intro. Thank you for
Appreciate
that,
it.
boys. Nice to see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
You're home. Are you home?
Yeah, in a rare twist, I'm actually home for a few days, and that's only because I live in the States, and we are coming up obviously to Thanksgiving, and the world in this country shuts down over Thanksgiving, and so there's nowhere for me to be. But on Sunday, I'm back on a plane and back to work.
That's perfect. We didn't want you to get comfortable at home. So
No, of course not.
Too much. Just getting back from your F1 hosting TV on F1 TV in Vegas this past weekend. That had to be a wild experience, just being a part of that event. And you've done, how many of those you do this year? 6 of those hosts?
Yeah,
F1
this was
TV
my
events?
6th. Yeah.
So what's the experience been like? You and I have chatted about it, but putting it out there in terms of getting involved in F1 TV and just being a part of F1 over the course of this year.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. It's been a lot of fun. First and foremost, it's very different. And it's funny, like there's the obvious differences between F1 and IndyCar, right? Let's put the kind of racing part aside. Just from the television side, it's very different when you are working on American network sports broadcasting, which I have learned is like kind of globally looked at as the pinnacle of television. And then what is this? And it's essentially, I kind of had the same reaction, but it's, it's F1 TV is essentially a streaming service, right? So it's a lot, it has a much different flow. There are different kind of rules and guidelines, and the way the whole thing's formatted is quite a bit different. The amount of control you have over the actual broadcast once you kind of get going, on the race from the commentary side is quite a bit different. But yeah, it's funny, man. Like you talk to people in this world that, are on the television side, and they look at US sports network television as like, that is the pinnacle of it all. I mean, think about it. It's been successful for like 60 years. They've had this formula that works, and it's just like held to the super high regard. So I came in here like 1.5 years into being like a network broadcaster in the States. Like, oh my God. So like, what do you think about this? And how are we doing this? And what do you think about how we do this? And it's like, whoa. You were giving me way too much credit here just because I sit next to Diff and T-Bell a couple of times a year.
It's like one of those things that makes you nervous when you realize that wait, they think I'm the smartest guy here.
Yeah, 100%. It's like total imposter syndrome. Like I had imposter syndrome just because it's Formula One and I've like never raced there, right? But then from the TV side, they're like giving me way too much credit. And they're like, say something smart, Hinch. What do we do here?
Guy, can you produce this show as well? You know, from your time on the network stuff. You've been on network,
right? Yeah.
I didn't know we were the top. Wow, that's very cool. I once, as I mentioned, I saw you try to do 16 hours straight television, which was one of the more impressive things the first time at the Rolex 24. I'm surprised you stuck with TV
official gig.
Yeah. You've been on the ground for these F1 races, and one of the things I think you could have a really unique view on that we haven't really had the chance to have this discussion, and Landon and I have talked sort of more at a high level about this, but you being a driver and understanding really the technical side of driving, what have you noticed about Max Verstappen in the last 2 years, being as close as you have, to say, why is this guy dominating the F1 world right now? What, obviously put aside the car, but even to his teammates, we've seen him just decimate numerous teammates. What is it that you've noticed from your perspective, technically or mentally, whatever it is, that you're like, this is the thing that stuck out to me in the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Max's mental game, it's outrageous. And that is not to put down any of the other drivers in that series. When you got guys like Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, you cannot fault them mentally either. But even when you have, look, his car is very good. Of that, there is no doubt. But like you say, when you compare it to a teammate, that's kind of the ultimate. It's always been the ultimate yardstick in Formula One, right? And he is, I think, to use your word, decimated everyone that has sat next to him in a Formula One car. And this year, you look at scenarios where he was throwing a couple curveballs, and it's happened. Like, look, we're 22 races into the season, right? You're not going to just have easy runs from pole to flag, every time. He's had adverse conditions. He's had penalties. He's had, what a bad pit stop, whatever it is. It never phases him. Even though he's got a car advantage every time, and it's rare in 2023, but every time someone goes wheel to wheel with him, the ruthlessness in his racecraft has not waned from running around up front by himself for 96% of the season. His approach is just, I hate to use the word flawless because human beings are human beings and there's always room for improvement, but there's just not a scenario where Max has been flapped. And even when he he gets on the radio, sometimes he gets a bit animated, fine. He's not like Oscar Piastri, who's been super impressive in that sense, especially as a rookie. Like even when things are going south on the radio, the guy just lives here. He's like Scott Dixon almost. And Max gets animated, but it doesn't slow him down. It doesn't bother him. He knows exactly what he has to do, and he just gets it done in a way that is like killer efficiency behind the wheel of a race car. It's phenomenal to watch.
Oh, Landon, I thought you had something you wanted to get to do.
No, well, is there? I'm always very interested in their driving styles and the technicals around it, and we can see more data and information now than we've ever been able to see across all sports. So after these F1 races, we've obviously there's plenty of online sources out there and content creators that are diving into the telemetry. I mean, is that stuff that you look at? Are you interested in that? Is there anything that stands out to you that's just like, man, this is something in particular that Max is good at?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a huge data guy. I'm a geek about that stuff. And I love that we're in a sport that has, you have access to more data than any other sport really. And this is something I'm always pushing on the TV side, whether it's with NBC or with F1 TV. It's like, we have all this stuff. Let's tell people. And they're like, not everybody's as big a nerd as you. Shut up. So I got to balance it a little bit.
Same thing.
But
don't worry, on the Money Lap, on Money Lap Live, you're allowed to nerd out 100%.
Perfect. We're all nerds here. So, no, I mean, look, it's pretty well documented that Max really hates an understeering race car, right? There's a few drivers that have that particular trait and they're more affected by it. Leclerc's another one. And I think they're kind of, it's a twofold effect. First off, over a lap, right? These Pirelli tires are so sensitive. They're so thermal sensitive. Their thermal degradation is, from where I sit, and if I were a driver, I would be super annoyed at how those tires operate. Like you slide them a little bit, one axle to the other, and you're waiting half a lap to a lap for that axle to come back, if it even comes back at all. That to me is like not what racing's about, right? And that's kind of why Vegas was such a good race, is the temperatures were so cool that the thermal degradation wasn't as big of an issue, so drivers could push, right? They were actually pushing the whole race. Qatar, when they had the limits of laps, that's the stint limits, you didn't have to make your tires last an insane amount of time. You could push the whole time. That race was awesome. So Max's style of not wanting any understeer in the car, it helps with the thermal deg. Just because, first of all, it helps with thermal deg, especially in traffic, right? He's naturally a little bit more on the front end. And so when you get behind a car, he's not as affected, which is why he's so efficient getting through cars. And then even just over a lap, just on pure pace, he's not as prone to having the front start to go away by the end of a lap, because he's relying on a super secure rear and having to add a little bit more input to the wheel. When you get to high deg places like, Austin or like Brazil, he's just able to kind of hang on to it a little bit more. But again, that car's not been the fastest over a lap at a lot of tracks. He's been out qualified quite a few times. But it's just when he gets into a race pace, the way he can manage tires, his mental capacity while still like performing at the limit is unrivaled. I mean, I think it was Spain this year. He was driving around in the lead, 15 seconds in the lead. And he comes on the radio and says, "Hey, what's fastest lap?" And they're like, "Doesn't matter what fastest lap is. Checo came in for new softs like 4 laps ago. So like, don't even worry about that." He said, "What is fastest lap?" So they told him, and he goes, "Okay, what's my fastest lap?" And it was like 4/10 slower, I think, than what Checo had done. He then proceeds to do a lap that's 1.3 seconds faster than anything he's done all day. And, half a second faster it's like a second faster almost than what Checo just did on new softs. Like he has so much in reserve when he's driving around to take care of the tires, and he can just like switch it on and get it done. Like it's shocking.
It's funny because nowadays it's hard to take care of tires. Like in NASCAR, taking care of tires, it isn't always what you think it is. Especially you have to give up speed in the right places, right? And you can give up speed in the wrong places and rush the center or whatever, and you end up just, the tire wear is the tire wear. And actually, for me too, especially when it's, thermal related, like you said with those tires, I feel like our Goodyear tires in NASCAR are very temperature sensitive. It's not necessarily wear as much as it is just not creating a hot spot, right? And it seems like that's one thing that Max is really good at is, and I speak to this just really to any of the best road racing drivers that I've worked with. Max is really good at just that min speed accuracy, right? He doesn't rush. He's not trying to rush that min speed, where as a driver, a lot of times naturally we're trying to carry speed through the middle of the corner. We think that that's the fastest way through a corner. He doesn't rush that.
No, for sure. And because he's got kind of more of a neutral balance in the car for the same minimum speed, he can have the like, if you want to call it the amount of sliding on each axle a little more even. So he doesn't wear one end of the car out as fast as someone that maybe relies on the front a little bit more. But like, it's funny when you watch his onboards, and this is not just him. This is kind of something you see in F1 because of the way the tires are. But if a guy overshoots an apex a little bit, right? If he carries a little bit too much speed in, brakes a little bit too late, normal reaction for a driver is, okay, well, I got to add a bit more lock. You'll notice they'll never do that. They will just let the car go all the way out to the white line without adding anything. They hold their hands. They're like, okay, well, there goes the apex. But if I turn the wheel more, that's going to hurt me for the next 3/4 of a lap. If I just ride this out, it's going to hurt me for this corner, and then I can kind of carry on. They're having to be so conscious about any amount of slip, any amount of wheel spin, because the thermal deg just takes over, and it's like catastrophic. I mean, it's interesting you say that in NASCAR, it's kind of the same, because like in IndyCar, I feel like we deal more with mechanical deg, right? Like physically wearing the rubber down. It's not as temperature sensitive. And again, you have to take care of that, maybe in a slightly different way.
Right.
But I feel like it still allows you to push a little more and not be penalized, especially immediately, the way it seems like you are with thermal deg.
Right.
So what are your buddies? Go ahead.
Well, I was saying with that kind of where, you pay what you do today or right on this lap pays the price 15 laps from now, right? As opposed to what you're saying with thermal deg. It is. I will make an interesting note, that idea of how they, won't overslip the tires, just force themselves or trained not to overslip the tires. I notice it more and chuckle about it more when it comes to reshaping the corner for an overtake, right? So that's where like you take what you just said and overslipping the tires and reshaping the corner there, and then also maybe they're overtaking, that just exaggerates it, right? So they're running each other off the track or making more, using leverage against each other. On top of the fact they're not trying to overslip their tires with an overtake. So you see these dramatic reshapes of the corner. And obviously lap 1 in Vegas is a perfect example of it, where it just to the naked eye, like it seemed like Max went way beyond what he needed to do in terms of reshaping his corner. And he had his own justifications for it. But that's just there's all bunch of, I guess it's just several interesting nuances to that for me, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those things you can look at that turn 1 in Vegas thing and you can argue that it looks like he just drove him straight off the road on purpose. But then you could also be like, yeah, he was also trying to make sure that he didn't just add a bunch of lock in, which could just generate actually more understeer and make it more likely for a collision, and also immediately start hurting his tires. Because, like in Brazil, they're like, hey, so Max, so when did you start conserving tires? And he said the outlap.
Wow.
Like you cannot even sacrifice a little bit when it's that kind of situation.
I'm curious about low downforce versus high downforce tracks that you've been watching with this, because what I noticed watching Vegas, when I watch these like Baku and Monza and Vegas, these braking zones where the F1 car is actually wiggling around. Now I know their braking zone is, like, what I'm talking about. And it looks like a
100%.
stock car, because it's like they've gone to such low downforce. Braking is what they're most impressive at. 5.5 G's under braking. It's ridiculous. You look at where they brake and you'd think like there's no possibility of ever like a car stopping there. What do you like? What changes driving wise have you noticed that when they're in the low downforce versus the high downforce? Is there areas where you have the Hinch's Heroes, which is on F1.com, by the way. It's a great report each week about who was great that maybe wasn't just the winner of the race. Is there someone that sticks out in those differences, or is there driving differences you've noticed in that, like talking about what they do well versus not well when they're high downforce versus low downforce?
I think the biggest thing I notice is when they're on a high downforce track, the aggression that you can enter a corner with is just like, it's mind blowing, especially that kind of medium to high speed. The change of direction is outrageous. Like it almost looks like a video game. And I don't want to say, and I want to be very clear about what I'm saying here. I'm saying it looks easy. I'm not saying it is easy, but I'm saying when you've got the high downforce on, they have so much capacity, right? They have so much grip. It looks easy. And I think if you talk to the guys, they're like, yeah, it's a lot easier than when you go to a Monza and you still have to get through like the Lesmos, and you have to still get through Ascari, and you still have to get through, the final corner there that are still these medium to higher speed corners. Your margin for error almost goes down. And so you have to be a little bit more precise. You can't just like get to a corner and go, here we go. This bucket of input and like the thing's just going to stick and go. You have to be a little bit more precise. So I think it helps. Put the spotlight on some drivers, but also some cars that kind of handle certain things better. And that's one thing that you can never deny in Formula One, right? Is how much of a part the car does play. And what we've seen this year more than I think any year I've followed the sport, which has been, since the mid 90s, where it is so hard to determine, other than Red Bull, who's going to be quick at any given track. And that has bounced around. It has changed as the evolution race happens over the course of the season. People are bringing upgrades and developing the cars, but it still seems like there's no rhyme or reason. Like, we talked to Piastri after the race in Vegas. He drove a great race. Should have been in the top 5. Tire strategy, safety car, whatever, kind of caught him out. Still finished in the points after starting 19th, nowhere in qualifying, nowhere in practice. And we're like, why was the car so much better in the race? the amount of post race or post qualifying interviews I've watched or been a part of this year were like, hey, so why were you so much better / worse than previous sessions? And the answer was
no way. So,
which when you think it's Formula One, man, they have more
Yeah.
data and more analysis
Than
than anyone,
anyone.
and they're still like, I have no idea, man. I couldn't tell you.
So it's exactly like when we hop out of an Xfinity car with zero data, and they're like, "Hey, why'd you go faster that session?" You're like, I don't know. That just happens. You are wearing plaid, by the way, and I think this is fitting because little announcement in the last 2 weeks. You're going to be racing in the endurance races in IMSA for FAF Motorsports, which ran the plaid Porsche. Congratulations, being back behind the wheel. Very glad to see it. It's where you belong. Not sure how you're going to mix that all in with TV and everything, working 3 different series. You're wild. But I'm curious, like, first of all, how that came about, and 2, what's the process like for you? To get back to being, Landon and I love to ask drivers, like, what's your process for preparing? What do you do to get ready for a race? What are you looking at? Those sorts of things. You've now got to jump from IndyCar, last thing you were doing full time, to doing this sports car deal in the endurance races. What's that process like? And congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all, thank you very much. I appreciate that. This is something that's kind of come about after, 2 years of effort. If I'm honest, there was talks back in 2022 when I first stopped IndyCar about, getting involved in IMSA with FAF, and some things got in the way last minute. Regardless, we got there finally. Canadian team, Canadian driver. So it's kind of a cool story. And we're really proud of being able to finally do it. The plaid was a coincidence. This is just, like I said, Canadian driver. This is just my normal wardrobe on a Wednesday.
He's dressed up. He's going to dinner.
Yeah. This is not a team issued shirt. This is just how I walk
I was
around.
making sure. I didn't know if that was official FAF gear, and or it was like Canadian
No.
tuxedo was the next thing. I don't know.
No, this is the one they just they wrap you up in when they bring you home from the hospital. You get every Canadian just gets a flannel shirt on the way home. And then, so it's, for me, obviously this is a big transition, right? I mean, I've done a decent amount of sports car stuff, especially at Rolex. I've done that race 6 or 7 times, but primarily in prototypes, which obviously are much closer to the world I kind of lived in with IndyCar. So the process for me going into this one is pretty involved. I want to get very deep into understanding how GT cars work. I've got 2 great full-time teammates, Marvin and Ollie, that I can really kind of lean on, especially Marvin. He's factory McLaren guy. There's arguably nobody better in a McLaren than this guy. So I had the chance to test a GT3 Porsche earlier this year. So I've got a little bit of a sense of kind of what the general class feels like, but it's a lot of video, a lot of onboards, a lot of data, sitting with the engineers, understanding, what they're trying to achieve with certain setup changes, what the best qualifying setup compromises are for them, race compromises, how does the setup develop, or how does a balance develop over a race traditionally for them at a given track, night versus daytime, full tanks and new tires versus empty tanks and old tires. Really just picking brains and trying to input as much data into my brain as I can before I ever step into the car. And then, you get behind the wheel, get a couple laps, start trying to speak that same language as the engineers and your co-drivers. And, again, I'm going to be leaning on the 2 full-time guys a lot. This is their car. I'm there to kind of help them win a couple important races and ultimately get points towards a championship. It's not screw anything up. That's like the number one goal of the guy in my seat. But no, I'm taking it very seriously, and it's exciting to kind of be back in the competition side.
And as the endurance driver, real quick, you get the best stints as the endurance driver.
Yeah, something like that.
The ones they just definitely want.
Right. It's hey, we need our like real guys to get some sleep. So if you could go ahead and do the 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. quintuple stint, that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. If you could just pony up for that, you don't need a bathroom break, right, for 5 hours. It's just like Rolex TV. It's the same thing.
It's probably going to be 35 degrees, maybe gently misting. You might have to drive around under caution for an hour and a half with fog, but it'll be fine. You're going to kill it. You're going to love it. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine.
Perfect.
Yeah, and just try not to be a second off of our lead guy.
Right.
What is there? obviously in NASCAR right now, simulator testing is huge. I mean, we've got tremendous amount of resources in this sport of using simulators. What's the simulation like at that level?
Yeah, so
Is there any?
there is for sure. We have a line into a DIL at Multimatic up in Toronto. They do a lot of work in the sports car space, and they've got a very good sim up there. But then look, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys, there's a lot that you can learn from iRacing and stuff like at home. So in terms of like fundamentals and basics, that actually is really helpful for me because the way you get lap time out of an Indy car is very different from the way you get lap time out of a GT car. And so one of the big challenges for me is sort of unlearning a lot of things that I know, breaking some habits, some natural reactions, muscle memory things, kind of beating that out of myself over the first couple of days in the car. And as much as I can do before that you can accomplish in the sim is huge. So that's going to be a pretty significant part of kind of how I prepare going into Daytona.
Is it more similar for you to a NASCAR, to even like a next gen NASCAR?
I think it is. I think it's probably a lot closer to that in a lot of ways. And it's funny. I mean, I'm maybe in the back of my head thinking that a little bit of GT experience might set me up for an opportunity to drive a next gen car at some point. Who knows?
Weird. Huh. Call out here. James Hinchcliffe wants to get in the NASCAR next gen car. I'd like to see it. Jordan Taylor. I mean,
you would need a little more practice running into people. But other than that, I think you'll be, it's definitely going to tee you up.
Yeah. I'll go to my local bumper car thing at the fair and just kind of get a little experience there. It should mix the two. It'll be good.
Yeah. I don't think it could ever be worse than what Jordan Taylor experienced at COTA this past year.
Yeah, I felt bad for him.
Restarts. Yeah, that was about as bad as it gets. And it's since there's been rule changes, we now restart further back for that exact reason. So they're saving us from ourselves, which is cleaned up. And I think that would be cool to see. How would just to stick on you as a driver, how would you describe your driving style the last 10 years? You have such a diverse background. You've been an IndyCar race winner. You've won the Indy 500 pole. You've done sports cars. You've done prototype races. You want to do some stock car stuff. You and I have talked about that. How would you describe your driving style particularly?
I mean, I think there are kind of two things that always stood out to my style when I compared to teammates, some of whom had a similar way of achieving lap time, some of whom had a completely different way of doing it. In an open wheel car, I was never the last of the late breakers. I would always make up my time in the last third of the brake zone, in that brake modulation, really rolling that speed, using the downforce. A great teammate to contrast against for that was Ryan Hunter-Reay. I mean, Ryan's got the fattest left foot I've ever seen, and he will go into a corner, 15 feet deeper than anyone else, and he'll get that initial time on, but he's got to stay on that pedal so long because he's went in so hot. Whereas I go in a bit lighter, but I can start to roll off in that last third, and really, especially in those medium and higher speed corners, if it's a hairpin, his technique is gonna probably reap more rewards. But anything corner, kind of 90-degree corner or faster, I can match or beat him in that kind of style. So for me, it was about that kind of brake modulation, rolling off in the last third, and kind of tied into that. When you talk about guys that prefer like a button down rear end for rear stability on entry versus guys that really like the front sharp and pointy, my whole thing was I always like the car to rotate on the brakes in a very linear fashion. This is a very hard thing to accomplish, but essentially the harder I'm on the pedal, the more front grip you've got, right? And as you bleed off, it sits back down in the rear. So I don't mind a sharp turn in, knowing that as soon as I release the pedal a certain amount, that back's going to sit down. We're going to transfer the weight to the rear, and it's going to settle where I want it when I want it to. So when I'm trying to set up a race car, that's what I'm really trying to do, is be able to control how much rotation I'm getting based on how much brake pressure I'm carrying.
So you tend to like corner entries where your braking zone has a little bit of a bend to it. as opposed to like a straight on brake zone where you're spending the first couple hundred yards or couple hundred meters or whatever in the brake zone straight. You like to have a little bit of a bend to your early braking zones?
Not necessarily. It probably suits my style a little better, but it's not a personal preference thing. Yeah, I mean, you go into turn one at Indy GP at 200 miles an hour, whatever it is, and you just slam on the brakes in a straight line. That's fun. That's cool. But then you go to, turn 15 at Barber where it's, from fifth gear down to second gear, never straight, braking for 3 times the distance probably that you would at Indy from, 50 miles an hour faster. It all just depends. Honestly, guys, let's be honest. We're all drivers here. As long as the car's set up right, it'll be fine. Yeah. Anything's fine.
I was going to say, you can tell Landon, that's a stupid question. There's dumb questions here, Landon, and that was stupid. So moving on. I want to talk about, that probably suits your GT3 stuff that you're going to do. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. The GT3 category right now is wild. I mean, so many manufacturers. And at the Rolex, I mean, last year, the competition level is ridiculous. I mean, it's 20 some odd cars that are all so close. Some of the most talented factory drivers in the world driving these things over 24 hours. And you get to the end of the race and there's like 5 to 8 cars within a second that are all battling for the win, tooth and nail. I mean, it's ridiculous. Are you, like, this is what a time to be entering into sports cars. It's crazy.
Yeah, can't wait. I mean, it's I'm super excited. I mean, I look back to that finish that, you and I were on the call for in 22 with the 2 Porsches. Man, like what a wild last couple laps that was. And you're right. I mean, it's at least 5 cars, if not 8, within that sort of 1 to 3 seconds in the dying hour. And it's just crazy to think, but to have what they did by making the GT3 rules sort of like universal around the world and just allowing cars and teams to bounce from different series and different continents or whatever was just so smart. And now, we're reaping the rewards of that. And so are the fans, just being able to watch that many cars, different manufacturers. You're talking about 30 drivers over those sort of 6, 7, 8 cars. All within, a couple of seconds at the end of a 24-hour race. It's just awesome. I'm super excited about it.
We've got you for a couple more minutes here. I have to get to the important stuff now. How many flights did you do this year?
Oh,
what did we hit? I know it's over 100.
Yeah. So I was Rossi always makes fun of me because I keep updating people. He's like, yeah, we get it. You fly a lot. So I will have done 112 up to today, and I still have at least probably 4 to go. 4 or 5 left.
So that's exactly my record in 2019 was a similar, it was up there like 115, 120. I don't know exactly, but it was up there in that level.
Yeah.
And
I'm probably not going to count next year. I just wanted to know, right? Because like I travel a lot, fine. And I knew I traveled a lot, but I didn't know if it was 50 flights a year, if it was, I had no idea. Yeah. So I'm like, let's just keep track of this. And yeah, I'd rather I hadn't done that because it's kind of depressing when you really look at the numbers.
That is a lot of time, my man. A lot of time. And now I would have to think it's just going to go up with everything you're doing. So I wish you the best of luck in terms of that many flights and at least being able to see your office in this home just a little bit more. Also important. Yeah. My girlfriend and I have been watching a lot of rom-coms as of late. Your wife, Becky, is an actress. Pretty well known to be in rom-coms. We tried to watch her newest movie. Wasn't out yet. So when can we watch this?
Oh.
It's on our rom-com list.
I thought, one came out, one called Christmas by Design came out. And I think it's on, if you go on the Hallmark app, I think it's streaming on there now. She has another one out called Christmas in Big Sky Country.
That's the one.
You noticing a bit of a theme here? Okay, that's the one you were trying to watch? Yeah.
Yeah, the Christmas rom-coms.
I think there might be maybe I saw something about the 27th. I know it's aired already, but I know it's airing again. If you look it up on the Hallmark app, I'm pretty sure it's got all the times. And let me say thank you for searching it out. We're
trying. I would like to make an idea here, pitch you an idea. I've got a rom-com idea.
Uh-oh.
So, these Christmas rom-coms, they all kind of follow a theme. It's always you know,
It's formulaic to
go-
a degree, yes.
go back to your old town, meet the
Mm.
flame, whatever. I've got highly successful professional race car driver, heads
Right.
back to hometown during Christmas,
Yeah.
finds old
Mhm.
flame, some sort
Right.
of, some sort of moment they're not together. Haven't figured
Hijinks
that part out
ensues.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, hijinks ensues. They end up together. Would that sound
Uh-huh.
familiar?
I've seen this one before, actually.
Oh yeah, really? No way.
Yeah. Very, very close. It's funny
Weird.
because
I'm
so
pitching that
Becky,
one.
she's well, you might be too late. I think actually there's one of the actors that she works with quite a bit. His wife is a writer. She's a script writer, and she writes a bunch of stuff for Hallmark. And she asked if it was okay if she wrote a script that was kind of loosely based on our story. And so it might happen one day. You never know.
I was too late. Damn.
My whole thing is I just want to pick who plays me. I just want to have some say over who gets to play the me character. in this.
Who would
I was
you
going to
pick?
say, who would it be?
Well, I mean, like ideally or realistically, because like Hallmark have their pool of actors that they pull from, a bunch of which I'm now friends with because they've worked
Yeah.
with Becky a bunch. But if
Top
we're
level.
talking like yeah, no holds barred, no limits here. It's very obvious. Canadian, married to a blonde actress,
Oh,
into
Ryan
motorsports.
Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, there it is.
How did I get that? Ryan, where were you on that? You never even got it. Our own trivia game here. Our newest trivia game.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Dude, you've been awesome to have on here. Before we let you go, though, we got to ask you our question of the day. So we do this all the guests.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's pretty easy.
Is this the very last
Basically,
thing?
This is it. We're done. You
Okay,
can
well,
just quit.
okay. Can I ask you a question? I want to ask you a question,
No.
and if that's the last thing, I want to ask you guys a
My
question
show.
before.
My show.
Okay, so first of all, I want to commend you for what you're doing
Appreciate it.
because
Thank you.
there's it's not. I know what you're doing is not easy. I have had conversations with people about doing something similar. You can tell by the lack of it ever happening that we did not have the gumption to get it done. And there's a need for something like this, and doing it
idiocracy.
live is ballsy as hell, and I love it. So that was just my statement.
Yep.
My question is, this is what the second or third one that you've done live?
Second.
This is second
You're
live
number
one.
2.
Second one.
Yep.
Okay. Second one in. Any major fires that you've had to put out, and like has it been a successful experiment thus far? I know you're going until like the 13th of December or whatever. But like so far, are you thinking like we're going to be looking at the schedule for 2024 because this is going okay?
So we have an awesome team, real small team that have done an amazing job. Our director, Zach, producer, Josh, everyone's done an amazing job. We have done some of these big live events with the sim racing stuff, which helped. In terms of fires, I expected the first one to just literally not even get on the internet. And it was perfect. So I would say that part has shocked us all. This second one, I feel like it's been smooth so far. All you've guessed have not even had an issue. We had some audio issues the first one. That went away. As the complexity rises here, I know there will be those times, but I think that's all part of the fun and flair. So we do appreciate the kind words. I think this is something, as you put it, we've all wanted. We want it in the motorsports world. This is why we're doing it. And the off season was perfect because everyone else shuts down. So to us, it was like, well, then let's turn up. Let's just do something no one else is willing to do. And I do appreciate you coming on here because it's the guests that have made this really, make it more than just Landon and I talking to each other for 3 hours. So that's as much motorsports stuff as there are out there. People can only listen to us two for so long before it becomes monotonous.
Right.
I can listen to you guys forever.
Yeah, who was the
Appreciate
genius to come up with a 3-hour live show after the race season ended?
That we are insane. That part, that was like someone said that to me. They're like, "Well, wait, isn't the season done? What were you talking about?" I was like, "Well, there's a little bit of racing going on. Don't worry." And I was like, "Everyone's bored."
Yeah.
What you do find is a lot of drivers are on vacation right now as well. The NASCAR Cup Series guys, they're proving to be a little bit. We've got one coming on next week unless Lewis Hamilton takes his spot. So.
Right. Yeah, I heard that part. It's funny because Rossi and I, we have our podcast, which is weekly, and it's only 45 minutes, and we are dreading the week after next when Abu Dhabi's done and there's like literally no racing left. We're like,
Literally,
oh
gonna
man, like we can fill in the odd off week, during the season because we can preview what's coming up or something. But like, we have nothing to talk about for like 6 weeks over December until Roar starts. Basically, we're kind of hosed. So I feel your pain, guys.
Well,
No, thank
anytime
you.
you want to come on here, you are welcome for the next couple of weeks. If you need to kill some time, if you're like, man, I need to talk about racing right now, and I need to talk about driving and you want to bring on data, this is your place. So by all means, we'll be here every Wednesday, 12 to 3. Our question of the day is, these two events are happening in Vegas. The one you were just at, the Las Vegas GP, and the Super Bowl this year. If you had the choice, which one are you going to? This is kind of loaded in your case, but anyway, which one? The big game or the big Las Vegas GP?
Okay, so there's two things to consider here. Vegas GP, okay? Here's what's working against the Vegas GP. The schedule was the worst for any motorsports event that has ever happened on Earth. And there are 24-hour races that happen, okay?
Amen.
Like literally 20. That is better than what we had to do there. And I feel for every mechanic and a driver and official and engineer and commercial person and PR everybody that had to work that event, every security guard, every ticket collector. The hours were so bad. And like, you didn't have enough time to kind of transition yourself into some weird, Dracula-esque schedule to like make it feel normal. And it was just the worst. So that's a big black eye for like answering this question. That said, as cool as it would be to attend a Super Bowl, I acknowledge that there are 867,229 people that are like, would appreciate it so much more than I would. I would rather give my ticket to somebody that would be like would literally, like, that's their number one Christmas wish list for life bucket list thing. And I will go to the GP with the terrible hours and look at celebrities from afar.
What a good Samaritan. You are not
he's so
only
Canadian
very
sometimes, it's
intelligent.
frustrating.
I was going to say, we faunted you. I don't think you saw this as Canadian race car driver.
Yeah.
And you wearing plaid came on here.
No kidding.
This guy.
And then just had the nicest comment to this question ever, where it was selflessness. Basically was the root of it all. To say, I won't take a spot. This is, groundbreaking stuff. Now, you're going to have to really become meaner if you want to come to a cup race, by the way. We have to find that inner
good point.
Meaner mean Hinchcliffe. So
I'm going to need you to just like give me a gut punch right before I get in the car.
I'm just knocking in the face real quick. I hate this guy. Yeah. You're in. You're ready. Bam. There you go. Liven you up. Anyway. Awesome. Well, man, we appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on. Enjoy your time at home. And anytime you want to come back, you're welcome.
Much appreciated. I will take you up on that. I will bring data. Keep up the great work, and happy Thanksgiving, guys. Appreciate it.
See you, buddy. Love that. Good times. James Hinchcliffe.
That was great. I like, that was a good answer. We teased on him for being Canadian and it being a Canadian-esque answer, but I think that I'm going to have to keep his answer in mind when it's our turn to answer that question at the end of the show.
I will as well. I think that was the nicest thing. I never suspected anyone coming on here and being like, I want to think about others in this question. Are we selfish? Did we just decide we're selfish again? Do you remember on the podcast when we said we were selfish?
Yep. Yeah,
I think we decided race, but he's narcissistic. That's what it was, and we did confirm it's true. So, hey, I want to. You normally do this. Do you want to do this, or should I do this? About our buddies.
You know what? You can do it. You're welcome to.
Can I do it?
Go ahead.
Can I do it?
Go ahead.
Oh, this is new. So speaking of selflessness, and speaking of being something that you want to give away, well, Spoiler Diecast, which has a range of diecasts from NASCAR to F1 to IndyCar, to all sorts of different merchandise throughout the motorsports world, has an incredible Black Friday sale. Buy one, get one, 50% off site-wide, excluding some other things. If you spend $75, you get a free rope hat that says Spoiler Diecast on it. So go to spoilerdiecast.com, huge supporter of the Money Lap podcast, one of our best friends out there. As you see, if you're watching the YouTube right now, producer Josh has a Voyager number 10 diecast there that he got from Spoiler Diecast. That's spoilerdiecast.com, just like the spoiler on the back of a race car. SPOILER diecast, DIECAST.com. 50% off site-wide. If you buy one, you get the next thing 50% off. Go do it. Go check it out. Black Friday, just after Thanksgiving. Thank you to Spoiler Diecast for their support. We can't do this show without them. Literally, they help a huge amount. How'd I do?
Yeah, that was great. You did a fantastic job. I mean, you even brought a helper
awesome.
along with you. I didn't
even know I had that. That was
great.
all unplanned. That was live here that we just threw in some content essentially to show this off. Speaking of which, we have a slew of things from a famous race that happens in the world. So I want to dive into this as our next set of stuff we're going to. And that is the Macau Grand Prix. Have you heard of it?
It's the track that eats race cars.
Literally eats them. So this race is wild. It's the wildest crashes. It's huge for the Formula 3 race, was the big thing forever. And it was a big deal if you were a young driver coming up trying to get to Formula 1. This was like a big race to win. They added GT. They'd have motorcycles. But some of the stuff that comes out of this race is so wild. One, the track is one of the craziest street courses there is. There's a turn, basically, I believe it's turn 2 on the front straightaway, or basically towards 1, that is one of the fastest race corners in the world at a street course in terms of like the amount of speed you take to it, but how unforgiving it is. We have this onboard right now of one of the F3 cars going through here, and it's just a tunnel vision as you fly through the streets of Macau, separating from the walls by inches. There's so many historic moments of drivers touching the wall and popping a tire. Max Verstappen a couple years ago, famous races of Hakkinen and Jenson Button being there and all this stuff. So it's pretty amazing. But that corner always has big wrecks, and there was some huge crashes at this past one. I don't know if you saw them.
Oh yeah,
there's an image of one. This is an Audi R8 that wrecked off. That's off the fast corner, basically. I think it's turn 1, basically. If I'm remembering correctly from driving it on racing simulators. I used to love this track. I used to race on it all the time. And this is the Hello Kitty car, I guess they're calling it. Driver was okay. Absolutely destroyed the car. Basically just came off that corner a little too fast, touched the outside wall, and then just rocketed into the inside wall here. Massive destruction.
Unbelievable. I mean, first of all, can we get a spoiler diecast of that wrecked? Oh my God, it's still going.
Would it be? I think it would be 50%. Oh, would it cost more? It would be 150% because they have to beat the shit.
That
out.
onboard reminded me of Quincy in the Park. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Quincy go-kart street race.
Is that you mean the Rock, like in Rockford, forever, Illinois?
Rock Island, I think, Illinois.
Rock Island? Is that what it is? It's in Illinois, right?
I think it's in the Quad Cities, or what? I should know that. But that was always like a crazy go-kart street course. That just that onboard of Macau, just how narrow and fast it was, kind of made me think of that. But
yeah. To answer James's question, by the way, about hiccups, we for some reason on this episode we haven't been able to have any sounds on our videos, so we're gonna have to figure that out in the future.
Yeah, little nuggets here and there, but I think our experience in live broadcast streaming is
audio is always tough. That's what we know. Audio.
It's been the bane of our existence when it comes to broadcasts.
You know what? Why do you need audio on a podcast? That doesn't seem like an important factor.
Yep.
An important thing to have here. Hey, we're going to do a podcast here, but do people have to listen to it? No. They'll just download this information directly to their brain without sound. That's the first ever podcast downloadable.
I think the reviews are in from the chat that my ad read transitions are a little better than yours.
Yeah, well, I just sort of took it off the chin here. I don't know if this is a fair judgment right now. I feel like I'm being judged off I'm like a fill-in quarterback calling an audible and mid-game and being judged as my sole play. This is ridiculous. I got more to offer. I just didn't have the chance. I wasn't even given the tee up. I didn't even know I was taking it. I asked. So I mean that's not fair. I'm just saying, chat. For the listeners on the podcast, there is a live chat on YouTube. We can see everyone's comments, which is fun. So, speaking of which, I did do a Reddit AMA this week to promote Money Lap Live. And we had a lot of comments. I think we were in the top 4 of Reddit AMAs on NASCAR's Reddit, essentially. And I think we had some of those questions.
What were some of the good conversations?
Yeah,
you had
I
there?
believe producer Josh collected a couple of them. So we'll see here if he brings them up. Because I can't remember them off the top of my head. That would be tough. I think I answered like 150 questions or more. So I went ham. It took me about 5 hours to go through all these. Definitely can't read what he's put on the screen here. If you can, Landon, that would help me out a ton. Oh, let's let producer Josh jump in here. Read these for me.
Can you guys hear me on the broadcast?
I think they can.
Yeah, you're pretty good there. You sound like you were in a soda can to begin with.
Well, I do live in a soda can. That's a well-known fact. But here, Hurricanes and Hendrick says, with everything you went through to get the 48 ride, can you point to one moment that makes you think, if it wasn't for this negative thing happening in my career, I wouldn't be the driver I am today? Been a big fan of yours from back in the Brad Keselowski Racing Red Horse Racing days. The Money Lap is awesome. Landon is someone that I feel like I get smarter every time I listen to him talk.
Bam. That's a great review. Can he turn that into a
great
review on Apple Podcasts for us? We're still going up crazily over there. It's very wonderful. And I did agree with him that you were quite intelligent. So you heard, I know I said you had a stupid question earlier because it was.
I didn't think that was a stupid question. First of all, that kind of hurt my feelings. Let's go back to that for a second.
Wait a second. What do you mean? You
How is
asked
that a
him if he
stupid
particularly likes a type of corner versus other corners. What is he going to say that? Well, I hate certain corners. It's like,
well, what? First of all,
He's a
I
race
think
car
that is a
driver.
fair
He's
question to ask.
confident.
I think a driver could personally like or dislike certain corners. And second of all,
I
maybe
hate
I
Phoenix,
should have
so
clarified
that's
or
true.
worded better, because he answered it for me and said that his driving style suits that type of corner entry, which is what I was getting at.
Yeah. Okay.
What kind of driving style? What kind of corner
he
entry
did
does your
disagree with
driving
you.
style suit?
All of them. Not turns 3 and 4 at Phoenix. That I know. Turn 3 and 4 at Phoenix is the bane of my actual existence as a professional race car driver. It has been since the first time I went there. I was like top 2 in the first time I went there in trucks when they repaved it, and ever since don't know why I was so fast. And then tried. You helped me out. You did help me. And in the spring this year, I thought I figured it out. Took that same stuff to the fall. Couldn't hit it if I was paid, which I literally was paid and was not able to do it. And then I started shifting. That helped a ton. But yeah, that corner, bane of my existence, does not fit my driving style. If I had to pick a driving style thing though, Indianapolis, road course, turn 1 braking, turn 7 braking, long, really long brake zones, peak pressure, what he talked about with like Hunter Ray, hitting peak and being able to maximize peak pressure and condense the brake zone, and especially condensing it later as the brakes fall off and you have to like lift and then brake. That's my style. I love that.
Interesting.
Yeah. You don't do that at Phoenix. Turn 3. Nemesis corner.
Yeah,
we should remind you all, by the way, Kade Brown coming up here, probably about 15 minutes. The winner of the South Carolina 400. We get to talk late model racing, which will be fun.
Yeah.
But go on.
We'll find out what it was like to race at Florence, win that race, big race, racing Steele Jr. A lot of good stuff.
Josh Berry, all sorts of big names. What were you about to say?
No, I was actually I mean, this is part of our discussions about Phoenix and 3 and 4 at Phoenix, is that corner feels like the initial braking should be a peak brake pressure type corner, and it's not. And I feel like AJ Allmendinger struggles with the same thing because he's good at the same thing that you're good at, which is peak decel, right?
Yep.
At those high decel braking zones like turn 1 at Indy. And it is possible that you use too much initial brake pressure in turn 3.
I think that is spot on. If I think back, like when you're struggling, it's just you're using too much pressure. You're trying to you're trying to condense the braking zone when it just needs to be longer, tabletop brake style. You put a certain amount, 500 pounds of brake, hold it for a position, it tabletops on the data, and then it starts to bleed off down to the corner. And I know that's a short track style thing that, I think you have a great experience with, and you do so well while you're so fast there. Yeah, not my style, not at all. So I think we have more Reddit questions. I didn't even answer that, by the way. The one, if you want to see my answer in full, it's there on that Reddit AMA. But my answer to that question, by the way, moment wasn't a specific moment, but it definitely was 2019 and 2020 when I lost all my rides, had no sponsors. I was hosting the Dakar, and I remember thinking, okay, well, we're done racing, and Henderson called me a couple months later after saying they were shutting down and said, we want to go racing again. We did Pocono, and I never forget being on the grid at Pocono and thinking, all right, this, just have fun. Like, just enjoy it, because this shit disappears. And next thing I knew, we went all the way back to doing this full time again. So no, that's not James Hinchcliffe if you're watching the font of our talking about issues. Josh, what's another question? Give us another one.
So this one comes from I'm not even sure how to read that. Party Quiz. I'm just going to call him Party Quiz. Hello, Parker. I remember in the Chicago street course, you said something along the lines of, if you won, you would celebrate by jumping in the Buckingham Fountain. Of course, with the heavy rain going on throughout the weekend and Cole winning the rain-shortened race, we never got to see it. However, if you did win the next running in 2024, would you still do it?
So I did answer this. Would you jump in the fountain, Landon?
Didn't they come out and say something about not doing it?
So I don't know if it was really public, but
not to give off the impression that I'm a rule follower or anything.
No. Well, I felt the same way. So I do this hit it was the Nashville weekend during the Nashville Sunday race. I go to Chicago, do this hit from there, and I do it in front of the Buckingham Fountain. I was in England in front of the Buckingham Palace doing a NASCAR hit. Really made a lot of sense. Anyway, I do this hit and I'm like, all right, I'm going to jump in that fountain. And so I talked to some of the people there and I'm like, do you think this is allowed? And they're like, yeah, I think you can do that. Sure. And so I go on national television on NBC in front of 4.5 million people. And I'm like, hey, if I win this race, I'm going to jump in this fountain. Well, about 10 minutes later, it was made very well known to us that if you were to go in the fountain, the next hit I would be doing on TV would be from a local jail cell. So they then continued that into the NASCAR time, saying if anyone jumps in the fountain, you will be arrested. So yeah, there will be no jumping in the fountain. We got to come up with something else. I did say on there, sponsored by a vodka company, of course, I'd love to just walk over to one of those local bars and do Victory Lane from a hotel bar, doing shots for everyone. That'd be fun. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
Bonds company, and that would make it
That too.
Then you can jump in. So there you go. That works.
There's lawyers nowadays sponsoring. We got like Morgan
Perfect.
sponsoring. Yeah, we got all sorts of fun things. Bail bondsman, that's the next big frontier in NASCAR sponsorship. What's next? What else you got?
So this one comes from Ginger Messiah 88. Hey Parker, what's your favorite memory from racing? Second part, your favorite memory from your work in the media. Thanks for doing this.
God, did Landon not have? I thought he had questions. Landon, what's your favorite memory in racing and your favorite part from working in the media?
Favorite memory in racing and favorite part of working in media?
Yep.
I'll do the media question first. I haven't done a ton of media, but I spent the couple years there working for NBC with you and doing NASCAR America, and did a little bit of pit reporting. And that was a good time. I enjoyed doing our shows up in New York, up at Stamford, Connecticut, traveling up there. It's just kind of fun and, I don't know, exciting to be in a studio and, recording shows like that. I was kind of the new guy. So, especially doing it, with you kind of jumping on live shows, I think the experience I gained from that was really cool. So I know that's speaking a little general, but I think that, live sports was kind of a fun thing for me. My favorite racing memory, man, I always kind of go back to that core memory of racing my way into the Daytona 500 the first time. There's so many great racing memories in my career, but like that for me, racing my way into the Daytona 500 2014 was just such a crucial moment in my Cup career, my career as a race car driver. The life of that team, of Hillman Racing at that time, it just was a pivotal moment.
So I can't remember what I wrote on that response. Oh, hey, we got video of you. No sound, but you're interviewing someone from Starcom when you were at Starcom here. If they're listening.
That is now when I was working for NBC, but I was doing the garage tour for NASCAR at the time. That was kind of cool.
Oh, cool. That is fun. Oh, I remember those. They do like the 10 minutes before practice or whatever, or after practice, they would do a garage tour. Those were fun. That is cool.
I think I might have stolen the mic. I don't know. So you said that your favorite memory in racing was the day that Penske Racing called you.
Oh, yes.
You were in an African Studies class senior year of high school?
In high school. Yes, senior year of high school. I was in African Studies class, and I get a call.
And they wanted you to test Kurt Busch's Daytona 500 car at the proving grounds. You know what's so funny? We've had the same careers, because I tested when I was 17 years old. I drove Jeff Gordon's Daytona 500 car.
No way.
At the proving grounds in South Carolina. That was actually one of my first tests at Hendrick, was driving Jeff Gordon's Daytona 500 primary.
First thing I ever did with Penske. I still have the T-shirt I got from that, and they paid me, and I framed the check. It was my first check.
You got a free T-shirt?
Paid to drive a race car, and a free T-shirt. Yeah, they paid me and a free T-shirt
sandwich, and that was it. Well, they paid.
I'd love to get that day rate now too. The money was big back then. How do I know? That day rate would be a wonderful rate these days. No one gets those rates anymore. So it was a good time. But yeah, that was a cool moment. I remember being like, "Hey, can I go to the bathroom?" And then I ran out, and it was the GM at Penske being like, "Hey, would you come test our car?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be there."
And your favorite media? Your favorite media was proving grounds.
Pit reporting with you at Road America and drinking tequila every night at the hotel.
I was gonna say that was a little too much. Maybe with a lot of bro romance, but that was a hell of a great weekend. Because
that was funny.
We went to Road America. You and I were the only pit reporters. Oh wait, no, it was
on the ground.
Did we have Dave Burns at all?
No, it was just you and I. We were the only ones on the ground because the others were remote.
You and I were the only pit reporters. It was my first time pit reporting in Road America Xfinity race, and we had a great time. It was fun, and we flew out of Chicago the next morning. So we drove to Chicago, drank tequila. I may or may not have gotten sick from just being outside all day, and
the weather was
catching a bug, traveling. You know how that goes.
Yeah, definitely. The weather,
and then had to
it was a bad ice cube too.
6 o'clock the next morning.
The ice cube can get you anytime. So if you have a bad ice cube, you never know what's next. Here on the Money Lap Live. Reminder, we got Kade Brown, the winner of the South Carolina 400 at Florence. Big late model race, beating the likes of Dale Jr., Josh Berry, Josh Williams. Huge names in the late model world. He's coming on here soon. I'm excited about that. I'm excited to talk about late model racing and short track racing. We haven't done that in the Money Lap yet. I think that's something that we try to do here, is talk about all motorsports. And this is a key part of motorsports. The cars.
What is the extent of your short track late model experience?
None. Zero.
iRacing?
Never driven one. iRacing. I've never driven one in real life.
Okay.
Can you believe that? I went straight to big stock cars. I went from USAC midgets to ARCA. So it was a bit of a transition. 900
that's interesting.
pounds to 3,400 pounds, about 400 horsepower to 900 horsepower at that era. And it was like I just remember so the first voice I did was New Jersey, and I qualified second, finished sixth. And then I go to Toledo, first oval doing this, and I overdrove the corners all day long. I finished ninth, spun out at one point. It was terrible. I went on the ARCA sim at that time back then, and I went, and everyone talked about lifting the start finish line. So I go on the ARCA sim, and for months, all I did was go to short tracks in Toledo and lift at the start finish line. And I mean, like formulaic, like you could not drive that car past the start finish line. I go back to Toledo, 5th race of the ARCA season, lead 110 laps, hold off Ken Schrader and Paul Menard on like 110 lap tires to win the race, and lifting at the start finish line the whole time. It was my first ARCA win. So it's a good story for kids out there. For Kade, kids like Kade, you want to get better. You got to put the time in, the effort, and find a way to get better and figure things out. I wish I could find some of that same ability right now, so I could use it sometimes.
I am going to make a quick assumption that a guy that races at Hickory on a regular basis and just won a 400 lap race or however many it was at Florence could probably teach us a lesson at lifting at the start finish line and rolling and taking care of tires.
I bet he does. I bet he's got some experience with that. And, he's won some big races in the Cars Tour this year and done, some big things in the short track world. So it's cool to have him on here. But I guess, without further ado, we do have the young phenom, the up-and-comer, the late model winner, the winner of the South Carolina 400, Kade Brown, here on the Money Lap Live. Welcome to the show, buddy. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Kade, congratulations, man. What a big win.
You. Oh, yeah. No, I appreciate it.
What was that? You crossed the start finish line. So I didn't get to see the race live, but I saw some of the highlights. Big restart at the end. Josh Berry right there, I believe on the inside, and you took the lead, never looked back. That had to be satisfying.
Oh, yeah. It was very satisfying. We had a bunch of late race restarts, so we had that. It was like a 100-lap green flag run, and we did not want a yellow. We had a decent gap. We were saving tire. Like that whole run, we were just quarter throttle lifting at the flag stand, just doing what we could to save tire. And no, we did not want a yellow, and we had yellow back to back to back. I think we had like 4 or 5. And it was just tough restarts. And the first few, I had Carson Quapple on my outside, and we chose the bottom, and we felt like that's where we wanted to be. And we learned quickly, like the top is where you needed to be to fire off. And so that last restart, we chose the top on Caden Honeycutt and used us up into 1 and then into 3. We repaid it, kind of did what he did to us in 1 and 3 and 4, and never really looked back from there.
Love it. That's awesome.
What we talked about, talked before you came on, we were talking about tire saving and, lifting the flag stand, and you mentioned it just now. And we love, because we're drivers and Parker and I are both really technical, we like getting into the technical side of it. And so I was excited to have you on the show and talk about late model racing and the technical aspects of it. And because I haven't done it in a while myself. And tell me about tire saving right now with those cars and Florence, and obviously you race at Hickory a lot. What are you guys doing with those cars? What's the tire fall off look like? What does it take to be able to run long runs and survive and be there at the end right now? What's that driving like?
Yeah, so it depends drastically on what racetrack you're at. Like this year, we've been better at conserving tires at like the lower grip racetracks, like places we go like Martinsville, South Boston, like that. They have a lot of grip, and there's not much saving at all. You just try to keep it straight up off the corner, and that's really about it. But Hickory's not too bad. Just try not to slide the rears and just keep it straight. But Florence is it's next level how bad it is on tires. I mean, I think it's closest to Myrtle Beach, fall off wise we have right now. And it's just every lap, like honestly, the first 150 laps of the race is just honestly kind of a waste because you're just sitting there putting around quarter throttle till someone decides to pick it up. And I mean, it's hard to let people go and get a big gap whenever they're just burning their stuff up, but you just have to know they'll come back quick.
I'll never forget the last time I ran the Snowflake 100 in Pensacola. So I qualified like 24th or something, and tire saving in that race was big for me, and as it is for everybody. It was a 100-lap race, one set of tires, and we there was a caution on like lap 30, and I hadn't made hardly any progress up to that point. And then the race went green from 30 to 100. So about a 70-lap green flag run. And it was just chipping away, just never going full throttle, probably never going past half throttle. And, inching my way up through the field. And then I ended up finishing second in the race. And but in the last 10 laps, there were lap cars that I was passing that were going so slow that I was coming off of turn 2, and I thought the caution was out. Because I was like still only running half throttle, but just driving around these guys like they were just coming off pit road or something.
Oh yeah,
and
no, it's how it is. I mean, we had guys like I was putting around quarter throttle, and then we'd had guys we were lapping, and it's just like they're pushing hard. They were pushing hard from the jump, trying to get through the field, but they burned their tires up so much that it was just like they had nothing left. They were just dead sideways, just holding on.
Do you like racing like that? I mean, we don't race like that in NASCAR anymore. I mean, we've had a little bit of that in the past, and every once in a while you'll get a Darlington race where, you're really conserving tires, and on long runs you're pedaling the car. But even in my experience in NASCAR, even my worst instance of Richmond or Darlington of tire savings or long run, it's never been anything like what you've probably went through at Florence or what I've, had at Five Flag Speedway. So what do you think of that right now?
I think it definitely suits my driving style a little bit better. Since I've been in a big car, I've kind of always been on tracks that are really bad on tires. Like starting out at Myrtle Beach, like you could burn your tires off in a 30-lap limited late model race there. Like it's so bad. And Florence, I have more laps there than anywhere, and so that's just really what I'm used to. The biggest thing, like the biggest learning curve I've had, is going to these higher grip tracks where you don't have to save. Like I feel like that was the biggest thing I had to learn because it's just balls to the wall. I feel like every lap.
Mm-hmm. Where's late model racing right now? What Cars Tour? You got Dale Jr. and Kevin Harvick and Justin Marks investing in late model racing and what's going on there. You're racing, it seems very competitive. You had a huge field for the South Carolina 400 this past weekend. I mean, man, it must be quite a time to be racing at these short tracks and going up with the kinds of competition you are.
No, absolutely. I think late model stock racing has kind of taken off, especially like the new ownership with the Cars Tour with Junior and Harvick and all them. But Junior coming in and running these late model races, I mean, I think that does so much for really just everybody in the field. It's good exposure. I mean, it's pretty fun to be able to race like legends like that. And Josh Berry coming back. I mean, he's always been the man in a late model, but it's pretty cool to have some of those guys come back.
I hear he's pretty good. And the crowds, do you notice just like how much bigger the crowd is if Dale Jr.'s there, or does it seem like a larger, bigger, and more intense crowd at times?
Oh yeah. The amount of fans that are there for Junior, it's insane. Like they say his name in driver intros and you can't even think straight. It's just everyone's going nuts.
Have you been door to door with him or raced against him one-on-one much?
Yeah, so last year actually at this same race, we raced door to door for I don't know how many laps, but I had the nose was tore off my car. Like we were not running very good, but Dale got sent to the back for some reason, and I was just driving the piss out of this thing, and he's just out there putting around. Like that was last year. This year, I think we were door to door for maybe like a lap. Whenever I tried to make it to the front to get clean air, like on that after that 100-lap caution, we were door to door for a little bit, but we've never really banged the doors off each other.
That's cool.
So I got to ask you a question because we couldn't find it. How old are you now, Kade?
I'm 17.
17. So where are you hoping to go? What's the next moves for you in your career? What does 2024 look like? Are we looking at the Snowball Derby this year, possibly? I know it's supers, but I don't know if that's on your radar. Is there races you're looking at? And then what are you hoping to do in 24 and after that?
Yeah, so we're done for this year. We're just going to start regrouping and rebuilding for next year. Our plan for 24 is we're going to go full-time Cars Tour racing, plus all the big shows we can run, like the Triple Crown, Martinsville,
Awesome.
Thanksgiving Classic. They're basically same big shows we did this year, plus some more, and then full-time Cars Tour. And then whatever opportunities otherwise, like at the upper levels, we can find the funding for. I mean, that's always something we're looking for.
That's awesome, man. Looking forward to it. That's really cool.
Definitely.
And what's your dream? NASCAR, or is that the goal at the end of all this one day?
Yeah, that's the plan. That's what I want to work for. I mean, I think no matter what, I want to race as long as I can. But I mean, I definitely want to shoot for NASCAR and having a full-time ride.
Love it.
That's cool.
awesome.
Where do you keep your cars? Do you work on your stuff? Do you build your cars, or do you have a team? Obviously, you can't do it without a team. But what's
Yeah.
your team like?
So I'm actually at the shop right now. I'm in a little office area we have, but I race for Matt Piercy Racing, and so I'm here, I don't know, 3-4 times a week. I'm here a lot with so I have a graphics business where I do vinyl and wraps and stuff. So I have
Okay.
my stuff in the office area, and I do all that, and then just go in the shop whenever, and just clean up. I'm kind of head of making the car look good with the graphics and keeping everything clean up and doing whatever else we have to do in the shop.
That's awesome, man.
It's a good skill, man. Well, first of all, congratulations. But before we let you go here today, we do have a question of the day to all our guests. So we have to pose this one to you. And basically, it's if you had the choice to attend one of these two events, which one would you choose? Both are going to be in Las Vegas, which doesn't really work for you being your age, but just bear with us. One would be the Super Bowl in Las Vegas or the Las Vegas Grand Prix that happened this past weekend. Which one would you choose to attend?
Man, that's a tough one. To be honest with you, I don't watch much of the Grand Prix stuff or like F1. I like watching NASCAR and short track stuff, just where they're racing hard. Like F1 stuff is cool. And I'm sure it'll like I would definitely say go to the Las Vegas GP just because I think that'd be cool to experience. But I really don't watch much of that when I'm free and when those races are. But yeah.
It's all right. It's all right. You're focused, man. You're doing it. You're
That's
winning.
good. That's good.
That's what
It's like
matters.
it's like the dirt racers, man. They don't pay attention to anything outside of dirt racing too. I felt like when I was his age and I was in the same boat. It's I knew late model racing and I knew NASCAR, and you go to any NASCAR race on any weekend and if you stumble into Christopher Bell or Kyle Larson in the driver owner lot, they're pretty much got their phone out watching Flow Racing or Dirt Vision or whatever those whatever's broadcasting the dirt races.
It's a lifestyle.
Oh, Landon, I have a question.
Lifestyle.
I have a question for you. So
What's
I
that?
remember I was racing a legend car at the summer shootout once. I remember you had a bus race at the
Yes.
shootout at Charlotte Motor Speedway. I don't know who it was that flipped one or knocked the fence down, but I'm pretty sure you won that. But
No, that's a good question, and I will tell you actually.
We got the trophy.
I've got the trophy right here from the bus race.
that is awesome.
So, Kate, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, that is my, big win of my career recently, and I got in that bus race when I was driving for Colleague, and that was a lot of fun. Won the race, and to this day, I think my kids, which I'm not going to correct them, they think it was a NASCAR race. So it was really for them.
What was the tire saving like? What was the tire saving like on that one?
Tire saving, not a whole lot of tire saving in the bus. Really a lot of focus on corner entry speed. You pretty much just fire it down in on entry, get all you can, just have it squared up for exit. Yeah, I think that's me in the pink. That might be me in the pink bus. Yeah.
We've got footage here. This is really, it looks
So-
high speed. It looks intense. The Legends race is probably a little bit cleaner than this one.
Yeah,
Who knows?
right here.
This was
Just
the most
big wide
entertaining
arc.
race.
Fire it
Yeah.
down in. You're going to carry that left rear tire, And when you carry the left rear tire, there's no drive. It's just basically you lose all your drive right then. So, it was just bomb it into the corner and, hope you make it.
This is amazing. We need to bring this back for the money lap. Kade, maybe you could join us there if we put it all together. My man, congratulations once again. Thank you so much for coming on here. Look forward to seeing you go out there, win bigger races, and continue moving up, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
Awesome.
Peace,
See you, man.
buddy. Rock on. Good kid. Good kid.
Yeah, it's good to have him. It's good to talk about short track racing. And, the Cars Tour has just got so much good energy around it right now. I didn't spend much time in the late model stock stuff growing up. That's what it was called. When I was coming through, I ran super late models and crate engine late models. So, it just seems like short track late model racing in Virginia, North, South Carolina is, alive right now. And to me, that's really good for NASCAR, because that is your direct pipeline into NASCAR in terms of fostering a fan base and drivers like Kade, who's building, he's not just building his skills as a driver right now, but he's building his fan base. And those are fans that will be able to watch him race at South Boston and Hickory and Florence. And when he makes it to NASCAR, they'll be able to go to NASCAR races and watch him, and it's, it's great too. NASCAR's involvement, in grassroots racing right now, I think is extremely important. I think that it's important for the health of our sport to be able to somehow come up with this structure, create a structure over the next decade where we can develop our own talent. It's like, I love seeing these big names come from other sports and dabble in NASCAR. It's cool to see Shane Van Gisbergen and, talk about Lewis Hamilton, running a NASCAR race, or, IndyCar drivers that want to try NASCAR. But really, I think the healthiest thing for NASCAR's whole vertical system is to have a proper grassroots, talent pool and a proper ladder system where, drivers learn and train to become NASCAR drivers within the NASCAR system.
Yep. To me, it's that plus they get, the open wheel system has done a great job of having rewards for winning championships, and where you place at the end of the full time, committing to a series full time, what that can pay for you to go to the next level. And it's encouraged, right? It's not take that prize money and reinvest it where you're at. It's go to the next level, keep moving up. I think that's going to be a key part of that as well, right? That these, having the right ladder system, and a ladder system that's easy to see, easy to understand, linear, step up, described in a way that's really easy for the general public to understand. That helps build the star power. If we start talking about, the South Carolina 400 being a race at one level, that we know that Kade then is going to move up to the next level. What is that level, right? And I think that's
the qualifications that it takes to get there. It's
exactly,
racing takes so much heat right now, and NASCAR especially, right? Because you can buy a ride, you can get sponsorship. You ask a driver about, Kade himself just now, it's, God bless him, but it's like when you ask someone what they want to do, the first words out of their mouth is always, well, I got to get sponsorship, or, the right partners in place. It's whatever variation of saying I need to get money to go to the next level. If the sport can get into this position where drivers, we truly are moving drivers through the system based on their accomplishments and based on their talents, it's going to be more compelling for fans and for the culture to get interested in what our drivers have to offer and the personalities that they have and their skills, not, just their ability to raise money.
Makes 100% sense. Let's, before we end this today, we do have some new segments we want to introduce to the live shows as we go forward the next couple of weeks. So we've just come up with these. If you're out there listening on the podcast or in the chat, whatever, reach out to us what you think of these and which ones we should add. We've got 3 this week. Should we dive into them? These segments, they basically sort of quantify our thoughts of the week. So we have the first one. It's #WreckOfTheWeek. Pick a wreck of the week. I don't know. What's your wreck of the week out there in the motorsports world?
Am I stealing the obvious one by taking the? Well, you know what? No, I'm going to. I was gonna say the Hello Kitty car in Macau, because that's just outstanding. But we haven't talked about Lando Norris's wreck in Vegas yet. I thought we were going to do it when we had James, when we had Hinch, on there. But we can spend a couple minutes talking about Norris's wreck. Basically, swapping ends, hitting a this godforsaken bump that is taking F1 by storm. Hopefully, the city of Vegas can find the funding to repave that road for F1 to ever come back and not have a bump in the track. Now I'm so mad that we didn't talk to James about this. Oh my gosh.
Well, I didn't know you wanted to get into it, but that you're stealing my one for later. If you're taking that, we can dive into it further. My wreck of the week out there was the Hello Kitty car at Macau, because Macau, I put this on Twitter. You can just depend on Macau Grand Prix being tremendous visuals of destroyed race cars. They've had pileups the size of entire fields. They've had, cars up on top of each other. Thankfully, once, of course, the drivers being okay, but is first and foremost. But if you're going to see some incredible imagery, it's going to come out of the Macau GP in terms of carnage in the racing world. So that's my one. Our next one is a big one, and it's an important one. And it also needs to be phrased two different ways because of the time. Hashtag wheelman or wheelwoman of the week out there. Basically, who's your driver of the week? Who'd you pick? Who do you think rose up, did something spectacular? Who's your driver out there? You're like, that's the one this weekend. I thought, damn, they did it. Or this week. I don't know who would be racing this week.
Since I was being a little bit sarcastic about the F1 in Vegas and Lando's wreck, can I say Max Verstappen overcoming all odds of Las Vegas GP, and going from "Let's tear the place down" to singing "Viva Las Vegas"? Is that our wheelman of the week?
That can be a wheelman. So for sure. Producer Josh wants to chime in on this one. He's got a wheelman of the week,
First name,
wheel of the
producer,
week,
last name
wheelwoman of
Josh.
the
Let's hear
week.
it.
Producer Josh.
I gotta hand it to Logan Sargent. It's not easy to come over and perform and get a P6 starting position in a Grand Prix anywhere, let alone picking up where Williams left off after the 80s and starting P5 and P6 after they finished P5 and P6. I know he didn't get the finish he wanted, but I think just going out there and under pressure, setting a lap time that matched his teammates' lap time, that gets wheel of the week for me.
He
like that
embodied
better.
the spirit of Frank Williams, Sir Frank Williams.
And it's America. Come on, it's home turf. You gotta perform on the home turf. So
that is impressive. You know what, Josh? You bring up a great point, which is that it wasn't only an impressive performance, but in the last chance on American soil this year, out of 3, he rose up and found it. Well, remember, Will Buxton was on this very podcast, which we'll hopefully have back on the Money Lap Live here soon, saying Logan wasn't up to snuff. He didn't have it. I think he showed it this past weekend. He did get beat by Alex Albon, though, which means they are, how many races have we been in F1 this year? 21? There's 22 out of the total. He's been beaten 21 times. It's a perfect record for Albon right now.
Yeah,
so
it may be too late for our good American.
We're hoping to have Logan on the Money Lap Live. We've reached out. We've inquired. We'll see if it happens.
Give him another year. Give him another year. I think that's what we need to do. Don't send him back just yet.
If you're a fan out there, tag him on social media. Tell him, go on the Money Lap. Tell him that. We need your help. We'll crowdsource this. So I have to pick one, don't I?
Yep.
So I like this new hashtag, by the way, Wheel of the Week. Instead of wheel man or wheel woman, it's just wheel. You're just a wheel of the week. They've wheeled it. They've done something with a steering wheel this week. This guy that I'm about to talk about does this so often that he posted about winning and no one was even talking about it because the guy just wins. His name is not Max Verstappen. It is Kyle Larson. Won a midget race this past weekend. I think 2 of them actually. No one talked about it because it's just so expected at this point. That's the hashtag Wheel of the Week. Is there a driver in the world right now that wins more races in just sheer volume than Kyle Larson? There's no way.
No.
No. He needs to come on my lap. I meant to reach out.
I remember you mentioned that to me, and I was like, is that even news? Like, if he wins a race, does it even matter? Like, it's...
If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it did it happen?
His
Kyle
wife has
Larson
gotta have a trophy
wins a
rule.
midget
Like,
race. Did anybody?
If he
even
brings a
notice?
trophy home, he has to throw a trophy out. There's got to be a limit at some point. I mean,
what is their house like? What if he just Landon's got the massive bus trophy there. That's the plastic bowling trophy style thing. You know that's what he's getting at these midget races. What does he do with it all? What if does he create art out of them, melt them together? The Wheel of the Week, Kyle Larson.
So
Young Money.
So let's go to the next one because I kind of stole it from
Okay.
you earlier. Let's go to the next
You
one,
did.
DNF of the week. Parker,
Should
you
I
can just
go
take.
first?
Let's just take this whole time. Let's talk about the bumps since we didn't talk about it with James.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about the DNF of the week.
All right. So DNF of the week, obviously the did not finish award of the week. Mine goes, and this is basically, it doesn't mean you crashed or whatever, but it's just an idea that you didn't finish it out or it didn't work out for you. It's the worst result possible in racing. Andrea Stella of McLaren, as you quoted or alluded to, his quote was that Las Vegas should investigate and remove and smoothen out that bump that caused Lando Norris to crash. Mind you, only one car of the entire weekend crashed in that corner. It was Lando Norris in the McLaren. Is that a track problem or a car problem?
I think that instead of that being hashtag DNF of the week, that should be hashtag the most F1 thing of the week was Andrea Stella claiming that Vegas needs to fix that bump for F1 to return.
I mean, yes, it was, I believe, after a safety car or whatever. So, they could be on lower tires, the tire pressures, all those things. But it's like no one else had that issue. If there was one other car, I would have been like, okay, we have some crescents here, but not even his teammate had the issue. Nobody had that issue except for Landon Norris and McLaren. Glad he's okay. Sorry he had to go to the hospital. That was a vicious hit, no doubt about it. That corner in an F1 car this past weekend was around 200 mile an hour entry speed, and then they break on a turning radius a little bit. So it's an awkward corner, but it's high commitment. 3.5 Gs.
Though. I mean, Formula One's mindset. It just sheds a little. I know we're teasing on it, but it sheds a little light into the F1 mindset of maxing out the car's capability. Max talked about it a little bit by being like, liking to race on street or road courses that are higher speed, higher capabilities. That's where those guys like those cars to be on smooth, fast surfaces.
Yep.
I mean, that's why they repaved Coda, because it was too rough for them. It was one of the nicest tracks I've driven on before. Repave it to the F1 guys.
So is that your DNF of the week?
That was that's my DNF for the week.
All right, I think producer Josh.
Well, I guess FP1 would be my DNF, my actual DNF of the week.
All right,
exactly what I was going to go with is FP1 is my DNF of the week. It definitely did not finish, and I would say that
anybody in Vegas that went to the race and fell asleep during the race, I think would be my DNF of the week. I don't have any specific examples, but I'm sure if we scoured social media hard enough, we could find somebody asleep in a suite somewhere. That would be my DNF of the week.
I believe Brian Blackford fell asleep after 5 laps is what he said in our YouTube comments earlier. So I
fell asleep after 11. I made it 11. But I had been out to a 26th birthday party and everything. So I was feeling no pain. So we got to answer the question of the day. All three of us here. Josh, since you're up here. Okay. Vegas GP or Super Bowl in Vegas? What are you saying, Landon?
Go ahead.
Landon.
You want me to take this? Okay.
Yeah, you go first.
All right. I'll take
We're
it.
gonna go across the screen.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Vegas GP. I think that James's quotes, I align with James a little bit, although we teased on him for being Canadian and nice and all that stuff. For me, I think I like race cars better than I like football. I mean, football's cool. I'm looking forward to the Ohio State Michigan game this weekend. We're, cooking, having some folks over, and we're gonna have a good time. But I think I like race cars a lot more than I like football. I do enjoy Vegas. It would be a good time. Well, they're both in Vegas, but I just think that there's more to do at a race over the course of the weekend. It feels longer. I think there's more to enjoy. A lot of parties, Super Bowl parties, I guess, are fun too. But there's our DNF of the week right there.
There's a sleeping. There's a sleeping.
Going back a topic. There's our DNF of the week on the screen. If you're not watching, you're listening to the podcast. Looks like a McLaren fan fell asleep after Lando might have wrecked. So, all
right, Josh. What you got?
So it's pretty easy for me right now, just because I'm feeling pretty confident for some reason. But I'm going to go to the Super Bowl. For those who are listening, I got my Eagles blanket out. I'm feeling really good about them this year, as they are 9-1. But mostly, if it wasn't for that, I'd be going to the Vegas Grand Prix. I think and I've been a proponent since the beginning that I believe if there's any reason Monaco comes off the schedule, it's because Vegas becomes more popular. And I mean, Monaco's great and all, but we've had the same argument for how many years now that the cars are just too darn big for it. So I think that's Vegas is probably going to be the next Monaco. If any track is going to become it, it would be Vegas.
All right. Interesting. I'm going to go Las Vegas Grand Prix.
Easy.
I like
Bunch of
racing.
racing guys on a racing podcast pick the race over the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's fun. It's fascinating. I like racing. I feel like because there's so many wealthy people, I won't get hit on by many hookers as I would at the Super Bowl. So no, I'm just kidding. Anyway, and with that, we're off the air. No, I'm kidding.
What are you talking about?
When you're at the
Is
bars,
that a problem for you? Like, is that something when you choose venues, you're like, is that an issue?
I think Vegas, there's often times where that approach comes your way and you have to, politely decline. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that would happen more.
You talk about hating Vegas, but you have problems I've never had when I go to Vegas. So, I mean, I don't know what
guys,
you're doing, but
this has been fun. I got one thing to say before we hop off here. Landon, were you a viewer of Top Gear? Did you watch Top Gear?
Not nearly like you.
Oh, well,
I'm gonna let
big
you.
News.
I will let you take this one.
Big news this week. We got to pour one out for Top Gear, especially the UK
Again.
version, the original. Yeah, pour one out tonight at your local celebrations if you're going home to your small town bar, and you'll meet your hot flame like a rom-com. We got poured out because this show to me was like the groundbreaking thing. It was the only TV show that I saw something outside of racing and I thought that would be really cool to do, other than being a professional race car driver, would be to be on TV talking about cars. And the coolest part about it was that you felt like, especially in the time I watched it, when it was, you downloaded on torrents and you had to find it illegally on the internet. I'm admitting that now. You felt like you knew about something that no one else did. Obviously, it became the most popular show in the world. Over 300 million viewers were watching this show at its height, basically around the early 2010s. But of course, Jeremy, Richard, and James left. They went on to do Grand Tour, and it's gone through different iterations now. But it was announced this week they're indefinitely suspending Top Gear on the BBC, which is sad. For me, it's like my childhood. This was the thing that just probably made me most want to talk on a camera about motorsports, about cars, whatever. I got to do Proving Grounds, which was a dream of mine. And I would say this show that we're doing right now, there is zero chance it exists without Top Gear and me watching that growing up. So pour one out for Top Gear. Thank you, Jeremy, Richard, and James, for setting the standard of a show that just, to me, is the best thing ever. And I love to go watch sometimes in the off season on a fall day and remember being a kid. So it means a lot. Hopefully someone will maybe resurrect the brand one day, but for now, we pour it out. With that, Landon, go ahead.
Maybe the Money Lap could drive race cars and treat it like Top Gear of race cars. We could
I think that's a
travel
possibility.
the world, drive different race cars, and talk about it.
That's my dream. That's my dream show. On that note, besides Money Lap Live, thank you all for watching, for listening. Go check out themoneylap.com for our newsletter 3 times a week. Landon, we're going to do this again next week. See you there. Happy Thanksgiving.